suicide prevention policy. It hasn't had a first read, so it's listed.
Move F4 to E5.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is public comments. I want to take a moment to recognize and thank the community for their support and engagement over the last several weeks, from the budget to open choice. The board considers the views of all stakeholders in its deliberations and welcomes and appreciates your involvement and support. I read every email. This table is about our kids and our community, and while all 6 of us may not all always agree, it is not about politics. Sometimes our discussions and decisions turn political outside of this table. With politics can come frustration and hurt feelings. I've certainly experienced that, and I'm sorry if others around the table or in this room have as well. This board has set aside time at the beginning and end of regular meetings for public comments for members of the public to share their views on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform the board's decisions on such matters. Tonight, given community interest in the agenda and the board's commitment to hear from the community, each speaker will be given 2 minutes, and the first comment period will last up to 30 minutes. For the record, please give your name and address. After the board gets through our business, there is an additional comment period where each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes, and all who wish to comment on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools will be heard. The board considers the views of citizens in its deliberations and welcomes and appreciates comment. The board listens to public comment thoughtfully and with interest. The board, however, generally does not respond to public comment during board meetings by offering commentary or answering questions. The board also invites commentators and the public to contact the board or the superintendent directly with any specific questions or comments. Is there public comment?
Hi there, David Tactor, 62 Wolf Pit Road. I'm just coming here to express my full support for the Open Choice program. This is a program that has been in effect for decades now across many towns across Connecticut. It's been in effect very successfully in many towns, and I think it's something that, as a town, we should fully embrace. I was very upset this week when I saw a paid Facebook ad coming into my feed. It was some sort of sing-song or poem, I don't know what it was. It was an attempt to make light of the situation and spread mistruths about the program and about the program's cost. I've spoken to board members. I've heard what the cost is. This is a marginal cost situation. The arguments made were about average cost, which is not the right way to look at this. If you have 19 kids in a room, you add a 20th kid, it's not a simple multiplication to add up what that cost would be. I think we need to think about who we are as a town, think about our values. We are a relatively privileged town. And I think it's something that benefits kids that potentially come in, and as well as our own kids, to bring some more diversity into the community. We have control over the numbers, we have control over the situation, there's no issue of local control. And again, we need to think about our values and who we are, not be a town of no, not be a classist town, and just be accepting and do good for the greater region. Thank you.
Hi, Lynn Vanderslice, 103 Middlebrook Farm Road. Many of you may have read my op-ed from today. If not, I have copies. I'll hand those over. And if thinking you've read it, I'm only going to touch on a few of the points. Wilton has a long and proud history of opening our schools to economically disadvantaged students from outside our community. Laura, I know you had Project Concern classmates as a Wilton student. Today, in discussing a land use matter, Rick Tomasetti and I spoke also about the 3 Project Concern students that were in his class. Board of Finance member Matt Ramondi and I often talk about his ABC classmates, Elijah Everett and Chris Payne, with whom I was very close and still am in touch. Rick, Matt, Laura, and my lives were all enriched. And more importantly, Elijah and Chris's lives and so many others were changed because of this community and the decision made by previous Board of Education members. You should rightly ask yourself, is there capacity at Miller Driscoll to take on 5 new students? Will there be additional costs to the taxpayers? Will there be costs that shouldn't be borne by the taxpayers? The answers are yes, there is capacity. Next year's combined kindergarten and first grade enrollment is budgeted at 6 fewer students. K through 3 is budgeted at 10 fewer students. Having reviewed the open choice program and the details of your own approved budget, the direct incremental costs are minimal, just as the change in costs associated with the the decrease in 10 students school-wide were minimal when you developed that budget. No change in the number of teachers, no new staff. Any good accountant will tell you the incremental cost of 1 student is not equal to the average cost per student. Yes, there will be costs these students' families can't afford, such as activity fees and athletic equipment, music instruments, and such. Wilton families have already stepped up to provide an endowed fund to cover those costs for many years. How do I know? Frankly, because my husband and I are one of those families, and I have spoken with the others. As I noted in my op-ed, there's an outstanding Board of Education and community commitment equivalent to 2.5 students for 13 years that is currently unfilled. I believe this community still stands by that original commitment. Through open choice, you have the opportunity to continue Wilton's proud and generous legacy at minimal cost to the taxpayers. I encourage you to vote to do so. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Keith Denning. I live at 38 Wicksand Lane, Wilton, Connecticut. I'm also the state representative for Wilton at this time. I'm the 42nd District. I have already written an op-ed that was put in Good Morning Wilton that I assume you've read. I echo what Mrs. Vanderslice has written, and I'd like to present a letter written to me from somebody who graduated from Wilton schools. I understand Wilton's Board of Education is voting on a program, Open Choice, and it appears that you have no data to support the success of these programs. My name is Albert Ruff, a 1983 Wilton High School graduate who participated in a similar program called Project Concern. I was bused to Wilton from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I became aware of this vote from Jill Brett Bacon, a Wilton resident who has 2 boys in the school system today. I have known Jill since I entered Wilton Public School System in 1975, and we remain friends today. She is not the only friend that I have from my days at Wilton. Everyone was so welcoming and accepting. I blended in well and participating in extracurricular activities. I believe it was a great experience from both sides. I'm not a Wilton resident, but I can talk to you about the success of the program. Participating in Project Concern allowed me to see a whole new way of life. I graduated with a 3.2 GPA, was accepted to Babson College, early admission, and went on to work at several Fortune 500 companies. This environment and the ability to develop long-lasting friendships, I feel less discrimination and am more comfortable in predominantly white surroundings. I am who I am today because someone stood up and decided to take a chance to help inner city young boy who wanted to learn. If you're looking for a success story, you can say I'm a living testament to the positive outcomes of Project Concern. I recognize the contributions the program played in my ability to achieve many milestones in my life and contribute to society. As I said to Jill, I hope Wilton will stand up again and take chances of another young girl or young boy and give them the opportunity to see a new way of life. Albert Ruff. I think that says enough for why we should continue this program, and I appreciate your time.
Hi, my name is Noah Litton, 270 Newtown Turnpike. I'm not a politician, I'm a taxpayer in Wilton, and I have a child in the school system. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and went to public school my entire life. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood with 2 parents who cared about education. I was bused into an elementary school in what was then a poor area to attend a magnet elementary school. I went to a diverse public high school and had to interview to get into a special program there. My father was an elementary school teacher and taught in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and my mother was a librarian. I have 2 aunts who were school teachers. I count myself lucky. I had a diverse educational experience, yet I am opposed to Wilton's participation in open choice. Our school system is a public utility that is set up for the residents of our town. State income taxes are redistributed to the general needs of the state, and that is to be expected. Property taxes are meant to be used in Wilton, not to subsidize the residents of other towns, no matter how good the cause and no matter how much our hearts want it. It's sometimes hard to do the right thing that is fiscally responsible. Sometimes it's hard to fight the urge to spend other people's money. Our school system costs are a combination of fixed and variable. It has to be noted, however, that even fixed costs are only fixed for a definite period of time. Fixed costs, when viewed over a long-term horizon, are variable, as in fact they can be changed. We have been told that there are no additional fixed costs for participating in open choice. The reference is usually about space in the classroom. I have no reason to believe that this is not the case. But if we are in a position to have extra space in our classroom, and if this is a trend, what does it mean for our school system? It could mean lower student-teacher ratios. This may be insignificant in the short run, but in the longer run, when fixed costs are no longer fixed, there is an opportunity here. If we keep FTE levels the same over the long run, and our student population continues to decline, our students can benefit from an ever-improving student-teacher ratio. Who wouldn't want more attention for their kids from their teachers? This is a proven way to improve educational outcomes. Lower student populations could also mean, over the long run, cutting the number of classes and reallocating space and teachers to things like STEM, robotics, or other areas in which our school system is woefully deficient today. And I know we're woefully deficient because I'm on the STEM curriculum committee. If we don't want to go in that direction in the long term, we could cut classes and FTE and reduce our taxes. By accepting students, even 5 today, we are removing these potential wins over the long run. Participation in open choice now cuts our community's longer-term options for the future. Now, what happens if we accept 5 students on the assumption that we have the space, but all of a sudden this reverses? Several large families move into town and suddenly we don't have the space in the cohort where the open choice kids are. Not a far-fetched scenario. What happens? Can we push the open choice students out? No. So suddenly, the no extra fixed cost now becomes a new cost if we need to relieve a crowding situation. The other costs that have not been articulated or discussed in any satisfaction are variable costs. There are costs beyond classrooms and teachers that we pay taxes for. Textbooks, computers, supplies, classroom equipment, the broken fence that someone mentioned during the recent budget debate, broken elevators, photocopies, sports participation in sports equipment. All of these are costs that are directly related to the number of students. Instead of subsidizing the taxpayers of other communities, how about we reallocate those saved variable costs into more funding for the high school robotics team, or another STEM teacher, or more of the coaches that our Board of Ed tells us are vitally important to our school system's educational outcomes. Up until now, I've been talking about foregone saved money. What happens if these students actually have IEPs, 504 plans, or other emotional and physical difficulties? Who pays? This is an area of the school budget that has already bitten us. Are we going to get reimbursed 100%? Will our costs go up? We have no assurances, only hopes and assumptions. I can go on and on. Bottom line is that participation in open choice reduces our fiscal options and leads to a fiscal subsidization of other communities from our town's tax base. If you believe strongly in spending your money on residents of Norwalk or another locale, you have the option to do so. There's a charity that is set up for that. A Better Chance of Wilton, I think it's called ABC. I invite you to donate. That is your prerogative, and that is the most equitable way to support children in need beyond the state taxes that you pay today. Until you, the Board of Ed, have fully explored all costs and consider that there are no better uses for Wilton taxpayer money and can guarantee that our total dollars spent will not increase 1 iota, I implore you to reject participation in open choice today. Thank you.
I'm Steve Hudspeth, 6 Glen Hill Road. I rise in support of open choice. I do so both for myself and for WEAC, the Wilton Interfaith Action Committee. I've today spoken principally as a result, actually, of Lynn's very, very eloquent editorial op-ed in Good Morning Wilton, to seek their views on what WEAC should do in these circumstances. And what specifically I focused upon was this. The portion of Mrs. Vandersly's statement in which she said, a child's ability to participate in activities outside of school with their classmates is critical to allowing them to bond and create lasting friendships with their classmates. She mentioned certain types of extracurricular activities. She focuses particularly on transportation to get to them and back, and on periodic extra help of various types. What I want to underscore is this is WEAC's sweet spot. We know how to do those kinds of things. We provide transportation to CF young children who need it to get treatment. We also provide to our refugee resettled families the opportunity for extra help. We also fundraise. We do meal packaging each fall, as many of you know, because you actually participate in it. That costs $50,000 for the ingredients. We know how to raise money. Lynn has said eloquently how she is capable, and friends of hers are capable of also raising money. What I want to suggest to you is there are many ways of dealing with the issues we face. What we can't do is speak solely from our heads and reject our hearts. Do we really think that it's the right thing to do to turn down 5 young children whose experiences in life can be fundamentally formed in very special ways here? And we've heard that eloquent testimony and what both Keith Denning had to say and what others have said about what the impact of these programs are in past forms. It would be a real tragedy, particularly over something which for now is marginal cost. And honestly, if you don't like the results, you can always change it. We're talking marginal cost now, and we're talking a system in which we can speak with our hearts and not just with our pocketbooks. Wilton is a community that cares. It cares in so many ways, and it wants to see the best. This program offers the best not only for those who are fortunate to come into it, but also to our very students here, who learn how to live in a more diverse atmosphere and environment, who make friends with people who wouldn't necessarily be people they'd ever know, and who have a chance to have richer, fuller lives because of something we do as a community. This is our charge as a community, to see the broader vision, to live what we want for the future, and to be the doers, not just the sayers, but the doers of those things that make that possible. Thank you.
Hi, Kim Healy, 14 Hidden Lake Bridge. I'll just open with saying that I believe in choice. I believe every child should have a choice. No child should be forced to attend a failing school. And as you also know, I'm working on a statewide program that should help every child in our state learn how to read. But so just before coming here tonight, I spoke to a really good friend of mine. His name is Wayne Wisley, and he runs a program in Bridgeport called Brave Enough to Fail. And that program empowers our Black and brown children in our state with the skills to succeed, even when facing extreme difficulties. And I asked him for advice on how to think about this program, because like many of you have said, I think it has worthwhile success in some cases, but is it enough? So this is what he asked me to mention to you. He said, "You should know that by agreeing to participate in this program, you are acknowledging that our state has failed for decades to improve our city's schools. This program was started decades ago. We know lots of towns surrounding here have been participating. And that there would be no need for this program any longer if the state had addressed the issues back then instead of punting them down the road." We talked about the few children that were very thankful for coming here. What do we tell the children that have applied to come to the program or to be participants in the program that don't get accepted? They know that their schools are failing them. What are they going to believe is their chance for success if they must stay when their friends leave them behind? This program will simply allow the legislature to keep kicking the can of failing schools down the road, leaving hundreds of thousands of the over 500,000 students in our state. Over half of those children are in our alliance districts, and as I've told you before, 84% of those kids are not reading or are doing math at grade level. Everyone who supports this program right now, I hope you do not believe that you are done with your work here, because that is not the case. The majority party who leads our state appears to me to care so little about the children in Norwalk that this is the best they can do to potentially help a handful of children. Sadly, the data shows that the long travel times that these kids make to come here for this program are no more successful than if they had stayed in their home district. Thank you.
name, address?
Yes.
Alan Davis, 3 Salem Road in Wilton. I have some questions for the board, which hopefully you will address as you get into proper session. But I also have some things I'd like to say. First off, my questions. There seems to be a lot of vagueness about the specifics of the funding of this program. So I would invite you to please share with us what you know to be the facts, so that we can potentially get a little more clarity on how things will be paid for. I'm thinking specifically about what would happen if the child was in need of 504 or an IEP. I've heard on the one hand that the sending town pays. I've heard on the other hand that we would pay. I'm sure there's a right answer, and hopefully you can clarify what that right answer is. The other thing I'd like to ask is, by joining this program, are we committed to it for the long, or can we try and maybe see what happens and potentially withdraw at a later time, right? People have talked about the fact that it's not 5 children, it's 65 children, one a year over the full life of the child going into school. But maybe it's the case, and please tell me if I'm right or wrong, that we're not necessarily committing ourselves for 10, 15 years or in perpetuity. This is something that we can try and see how things go, that we all have the option of withdrawal. So 2 questions. Second thing I'd like to ask, the last thing I'd like to say, that I'll count it as a question anyway. As I observe the rhetoric that has been thrown out in various places here, it begs me to ask you a question. Why are we so selfish? This is a great town, a great community with great schools. If we have the opportunity to share because we have some spare places, and I'll come back to spare places in a second, why shouldn't we? Let's help. But to spare places, this is kind of another question. I said I wouldn't ask any more questions, but I have one more question. As I understand it, in any given year, we get to say how many spare places we have and how many children we potentially invite into our school. So again, there's no commitment there, right? It's a question, if we feel we have the ability to accommodate 4 children at no extra cost because we have spaces in the classrooms, we choose to do so, but we have no obligation to do so, right? So again, I guess that's 3 questions I'm asking you. And finally, I'd like to say, as a family that was invested in the ABC program, we were a host family for an ABC child. As much as I love that program and I think it's great, it's only in high school. And we have the opportunity here to help to perhaps improve the quality of some children's lives when early education is that much more formative and very important in life. So that's all I have to say.
Any other comments?
Good evening, Chris Trout, Middlebrook Farm Road. I'd like to offer commentary on 2 topics, if I may. One is the open choice, and the second is the 2024 Board of Education budget. So I support Dr. Smith's recommendation to the BOE that the Wilton Public Schools participate in the open choice program. We in Wilton have an opportunity to extend the benefits of our exceptional public school system to less privileged students without incurring any appreciable incremental direct costs and without adversely affecting the instruction of Wilton's children. On the contrary, Dr. Smith anticipates educational benefits for our young citizens. The financial analysis is straightforward. The marginal, not average, cost of adding 5 students spread over 2 grades is close to 0. And the per pupil payment we receive is $3,000. However, in the event that the financial costs have been misjudged, I'm quite confident that private funding can be secured, as I know 2 families who have already agreed to make material contributions, Lynn Paul Vanderslice and Catherine I. The impact on educational outcomes for in-district students, though, is difficult to gauge objectively, particularly since the empirical data linking class sizes and student performance is mixed. I remain, however, confident in this administration's professional judgments, and I believe it would be foolish to rely on a layman's assessment of pedagogical effectiveness. So the decision seems straightforward to me. We can do good for the less fortunate at no cost, and we should. The second is about the budget. The Board of Finance is a deliberative, not a legislative body. We, the voters, decide what we wish to spend on town services, including the education of our children. I did not support the Board of Finance's decision to present to the annual town meeting a reduced BOE budget. The budget submitted to the Board of Finance was approved unanimously after your thorough and careful consideration of the cost of the instructional programs required to fulfill the mandate of the Wilton Public Schools. A reduction in the BOE budget, if approved by voters, will adversely affect our students, as articulated by Dr. Smith, a conclusion I infer you share. And the cost saving? Less than $1 per day per household. I asked the BOE to invest its substantial energy and expertise in advocating for a substantial voter turnout at the annual town meeting and to vote no too low.
Any other public comments in the room?
I've never done this before, so be patient. Jennifer Wolf, 31 West Meadow Road. I actually wrote I'm much better at writing than I am talking, so I'm just going to read part of what I wrote to letter to the editor at Good Morning Milton. Paraphrase. So I understand that a lot of people see this as a charitable thing that we could do, and absolutely, I think it's the right thing to do. I think I came to Wilton because it's a giving, lovely town with families that welcomed us, with families that believe in things and want the world to be better. However, there's that aspect, but we're giving stuff to our kids too by doing this. Our kids are in a school with 1% black kids. And that's just, it's not right. I realize there are many societal reasons why that's the case, and that a lot of people might say that that's not our fault, but it's a fact. And it would be nice to be part of trying to rectify that. Little has changed in 60 years since the Civil Rights Act. I think it's important that our kids get to know kids of different cultures from an early age. Again, ABC program is great. It's high schoolers, and they come here, no one looks like them, they're alone, they're away from their families, and it's very hard to forge bonds in high school. We all know that. So having kids in our district from very early age would make an enormous difference in not only their lives, but our kids' lives as well. I find it sad that we're at the one, and I did all sorts of research on this, 4-year universities, their black populations are around 13%. So our kids are coming from here, going there, and they're suddenly seeing this whole world that we could have given them much earlier, just a smidgen. It's, again, and I would love to have a primer on budgets, because I think that 23,000 number is extremely misleading, and it doesn't cost that, and we'd be able to give some kids, possibly make a massive difference in their lives for very, very little cost to the district.
Hi, I'm Ken Hoffman, 182 Drum Hill Road. I'm going to reiterate a lot of what was just said. I happen to be the stepfather to 2 children in Wilton. Both are biracial, both went through the Wilton Public Schools, and 3 children who are not biracial who went through the Wilton Public Schools. All of them benefited from the fact that in Wilton, you give them a great opportunity to get good education, and all 5 of them made good use of that and do amazing things now. But all 5 of them would say that the one thing that they came away from in the Wilton Public Schools was not enough preparation about diversity, inclusion through direct exposure, to learn what advantages they could get from learning about other parts of the greater Connecticut community, other cultures, other ideas, other families. And one of the things that I think the Open Choice program does is brings net advantage into our schools for the students who already live here, as well as advantages for these 5 students. Look, as someone said, it's only 5 students in a state which has a tremendous underprivileged student population. Those of you that know Carrie Nicholas, who is my partner, you'll know that she's a social worker in the Bridgeport Public Schools. So on a daily basis, I get to experience the difference between the Wilton Public Schools and the lack of advantages there are in a community like that. But even though it will only advantage 5 children for this year, that's 5, okay? And I have waited for Connecticut to approach the idea of academic equality. I've lived in Connecticut since I was 20 years old, and I'm a year or two older than that now. And I've seen very little progress. So at least it's 5. But I really think what you're doing is bringing a tremendous opportunity to children here in Wilton. They will be exposed to different things. They will learn different things because I read an article about instruction time. Instruction happens, at least in my view, not as informed as your view, in 3 ways. There is one-on-one instruction, there is peer-to-peer instruction, and then there is group instruction in the schools. And hopefully that peer-to-peer instruction will benefit these children as they grow up. And they won't be saying, as my 2 biracial children said as they were growing up in Wilton, I didn't really learn about what a biracial society or a multiracial society was until after I left the Wilton Public Schools. So thank you very much for your effort. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the Zoom?
Somebody just raised their hand.
So I think, in the interest of time, Cece, if you want to go ahead, and then we'll do the remaining 2 people in the room. And we'll go to Cece, then we can go to Zoom, and then there's one other person in the room, and then the remainder will be for the end of the evening.
Hi, I'm Cece Marr. I live at 47 Sturgis Ridge Road, and a lot has been said tonight about the ABC program. I was on the board of ABC for 8 years, but also longer than that because I was a social worker for both the schools, both of the houses, both the boys' house and the girls' house. And I would just like to bring up a point that nobody's mentioned so far, and I won't take up much of your time. One of the things we don't think about when we think about the gift of education that we're talking about here with Open Choice is the students who will be coming to us are self-selecting into a program. And these students, they are giving up a tremendous amount. In working with the ABC students, I saw that time and time again. And I put them all on pedestals in my mind. Because what they gave up to leave their community, to leave their friends, to get a better education, you cannot underscore the impact for that child and that family. They're giving up to be able to leave their community and to come here for better education. Or let's not even say better education, more education, and perhaps other opportunities. So I want us to think about that type of child who's willing to come into our classrooms and be bused or be driven by their parents and take on what it's like to come into a predominantly white environment and thrive. They will be nothing but a benefit to our school, for our children, for our students, and for their families. So, thank you.
We're going to do Zoom first, and then we'll get to the last person in the room. Hello? Are you able to?
Hi.
Go ahead,
Hi.
please.
My name is Crystal Lukowski. I live at 140 Old Kings Highway in Wilton, Connecticut. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that the lottery for Open Choice is a blind lottery, that you are not able to expose race and ensure that you are going to be taking on children of different ethnic backgrounds, that there are 65.5% of the population of Norwalk is white, and that typically when you have these types of programs, the applicants will be the more privileged, affluent families that will take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm not saying whether I'm for or against. I just wanted to make sure that everyone speaking to the fact that you're going to be bringing in people of different ethnicities and different cultures is not accurate, that it is a blind lottery. Thank you.
Is that true? I don't believe
Well,
We're just, no, we're gonna just,
Please.
thank you.
Clarify confusion.
First meeting.
It's okay.
Okay, well,
Final comment from the room.
No, yes.
I'm Peter Squitieri, I live at 67 Milton Crest, and the first thing is, I would like it if you would answer the question about finances, because there seems to be quite a bit of misinformation about it. But for several years now, Wilton has been sharpening its focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, emphasizing the ability to understand the social perspective of different racial, ethnic, and gender groups. Bringing students into the system who actually have and live in these perspectives could greatly enhance the impact of this education, a benefit to Wilton students, and of course it would give these students the quality of education that Wilton is known for. For these reasons, I strongly support the Open Choice Program.
Thank you. We're going to move into the regular part of the meeting now. Consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Ruth, we adjusted the agenda. Did we ever approve the agenda?
After we adjusted it?
We did? Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Next, move to reports and recognition. Board chairs report. I have no report tonight. Superintendent Smith.
Great. I'd like to use this time to just update you and provide some celebrations. It's been a few weeks since we last met, and it's been busy. It's been especially busy over there at Middlebrook School. So back on the 29th, Middlebrook and its staff held its first arts festival. It was great. I don't know if any of you had a chance to attend, but they showcased the talents of our artists, our musicians, and our young budding chefs who are making falafel, which was amazing. So I want to say thank you to Jory and to that team, our FAPA colleagues who really took a risk, and it paid off. It was great to see so many community members out, and as always, our kids are incredible and are talented in so many ways. The next day, we had Career Awareness Day, and so more than 50 of our community members joined the staff there to speak to students about their various professions. I had 3 reports in my house, and they were all 5 stars. So, again, thank you to that team and to the Wilton Education Foundation for supporting that, and we look forward to, picking this up now and, making it an annual tradition. We want to congratulate Middlebrook music teacher Michael Gordon, who is the recipient of the 2023 Fund for Teachers Award. This Fund for Teachers provides fellowships so that teachers can self-design and engage in summer learning experiences. You'll recall we had 2 of our Cider Mill teachers win a grant last year, and they went off and did some studying in Hawaii. Michael is heading to India for 3 weeks, and we can't wait for him to go and come back so we can hear about all that he has learned. A week ago Saturday on the 25th, the Middlebrook Science Olympiad students competed at the State Science Olympiad up in Coventry. Team members earned medals in 6 events, and the school earned 2nd place overall. So, Jory, bravo. Congratulations to you, to those students, to our science teachers, Kendra Norman and Debbie Malazzi, who have led them and prepared them. Really remarkable. This year is the year of Wilton debate. So we heard the last time we were here about our high school's success. This past weekend, Middlebrook sent 9 debate teams to participate in the Connecticut Middle School Debate League Championship Tournament. Say that 3 times fast. So 9 of our debaters placed in the top 25 in a pool of 66 or so. 2 of our teams competed against each other in the final round. Did I get that right? So how about that, right? So Margaret Wren, Olivia Durden, Ishan V. Jaiwal competed against Nadia Khan, Arav Gupta, Gopika Kaimal. And so it sounds like it was a 2-1 split decision, and Nadia, Arav, and Gopika took 1st place, and we also took 2nd place. So how amazing is that? So bravo. Is that what 7th grade beat the 8th grade? So they're going to have another bite at the apple next time, I bet. So again, terrific for our kids, and hats off to Katie Durkin and Mike Pinoli, their teacher advisors. And then on the music front over at Middlebrook, 4 of our students represented Middlebrook School in Hartford at the CMEA's 6th grade honors choir. And so we want to congratulate Kurt J., Elise P., Spencer S., and Rachel V., who were up there in Hartford representing Middlebrook School in the choir. So amazing. You're probably all aware the high school spring sports season is well underway. Our teams are off to a great start, and last night as I was catching up on my news feed, I saw that our girls varsity lacrosse team is ranked 9th in the country by Inside Lacrosse right now. And Connecticut, I won't tell you the other 2 teams because they're our arch rivals. They're also ranked in the top 10. But, first time I think Connecticut's had 3 teams in the top 10. So pretty impressive. And then, last, certainly not least, we've had a wonderful celebration all week here at the high school. This has been festival week. Festival returned after the COVID hiatus. And here too, we take an opportunity to celebrate arts and culture through the course of the entire week. And then the week is typically closed out, and I didn't make it this year, but it did happen. We have a fabulous, I refer to them as the Jim Sheridan Band. I know that's not the right title, but we have a group of teachers who are, supremely talented, and they typically close out the week with a performance for our kids. So hats off to you all, and thank you for setting that up, and to all of you for, continuing to honor arts, culture, and music in our fine school system. That's it.
Thank you. We now move to review and discuss, and the first item under review and discuss is Board of Finance budget deliberations under BOE goal number 7.
Hear about committee reports?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm skipping around. Committee reports. Yes, teaching and learning.
Do you want to talk or you want me to?
You go.
I don't know. We talked about screen time. We delayed the update on school mental health, but it was sent in a little bit later. We talked about intervention statistics. Screen time, we basically just talked about continuing to reinforce half screening, putting your phones in cubbies. We also talked about possibly, well maybe not possibly, but putting together some sort of a group together or pilot to have some teachers kind of chart screen time, how often they're on screens, why they're on screens, so that we can have some actual data to support what we're talking about. We talked about possibly reinforcing the use of links in Schoology to have parents be able to print stuff at home if they don't want their kids on screens. We also talked about the school finding ways to block sites and social media while the students are in school. The intervention statistics, there is a chart online. If anybody wants to see it, it talks about how many kids are currently receiving services, how many have exited, how many have exited Tier 1 and gone into special education, vice versa. And then we also talked about summer a little bit. There are currently 75 students that have accepted a placement in our summer intervention program.
Policy?
We met this Tuesday the 4th. We reviewed a policy 5141.21, administration of medicines by school personnel and administration of medication during, before, and after school programs and after school readiness. Shipman has a model policy on that. We're Wiltonifying it a bit and bring it to the board next meeting. There's 2 new draft policies that are required by the state. Emergency action plan for interscholastic and intramural athletic events, and everything's got big words in it today. Exertional heat illness awareness for intramural and interscholastic athletics. There's some others coming to the table, I think, ready for prime time next meeting, the minority staff and physical examination policy.
And operations did not meet.
No.
Now, yes, to review and discuss Board of Finance budget deliberations.
Great. So I put at your place and left in the room some proposed reductions. Before I get into that, I just want to replay the tape here a little bit. So when we started, the initial budget proposal that you all saw back in January was almost a $92 million proposal, which represented a 5.99% increase over this current year's spending. As I shared with you at the time, the initial draft that, among the administrative team that we looked at was actually, contemplating like a 10% increase. And so, to me, that just reflects that there are a lot of needs, a lot of interest, primarily around adding staff. You didn't see that initial proposal, you saw the 599. And then, I talked over the last several months about just what some of those drivers are. We know that we had a substantial teachers contract agreement this year that was contributing to the increase. We have other contractual obligations. Inflation certainly played a role with the increased cost of goods and services. And then we also saw a pretty substantial increase in the cost of special education outplacements this year that also is a driver of the budget increase. And then last, but also really importantly, was the loss of revenue that we had in place for the last several years as a result of the ESSER grants and COVID funding. So all of those really, conspired to create a perfect storm, which led to the kinds of proposed increases we're seeing. From that initial proposal to the budget the board adopted back on February 16th, we were able to reduce that proposal to what amounts to what was a 4.5% increase, and that was the budget that the Board of Finance deliberated on. Since Lynn's in the room, I just want to take a minute and say thank you to her, thank you to Matt Knickerbocker. The town's got its own budget issues, but when Lynn saw what we were wrestling with, she called and said, we think we can, we have a grant, we can manage the camera installation. So that was an immediate $233,000 off the table for the Board of Ed. In similar fashion, Matt Knickerbocker, our new town administrator, renegotiated an electricity contract, which for the board represented savings of $293,000, and we expect to see savings. We haven't talked about that a lot here, and I don't know what the conversation's been in other places, but I want to just take the opportunity to say thank you again. That made a big difference in what we were trying to do here. In terms of the other reductions we took to get to that 4.5%. I've been updating you periodically about our medical claims history. Through and right after COVID, the medical claims history increased quite a bit. And so what we're seeing is what they refer to as a boomerang effect. So over the course of this year, as we're watching our month-by-month claims, the total cost is coming down again. And so, because of that favorability, we feel pretty comfortable in being able to reduce what we were initially proposing as anticipated medical costs. So that was, nearly $400,000 in reductions. And then we had some other, smaller areas. So life insurance, we took $1,000, defined contribution, $16. Athletics transportation was a sizable reduction. It was about $83,000, and that was after some renewed negotiations with STA, our bus company, and a commitment from them to absorb all of our athletics transportation. You recall we were having issues with driver shortages, and last year and through the early part of this year, relying very heavily on third-party vendors, which come at a cost almost double to what STA would charge for those kinds of runs. So things are going really well right now with STA, and we're on track there. And then we made some other reductions: training and conferences, $21,000, diesel $10,000, in-district transportation $2,000, athletics $1,400, and then we made a salary estimate adjustment to our trainers, which amounted to about $17,000. So that's what got us to 4.5. This last week, after the Board of Finance deliberation, they have further reduced our proposal another $1.4 million. So now the current budget stands at a 2.89% increase over this current year's spending. That total change from the 5.99 down, represents almost a $2.7 million reduction. So if you turn your attention to the draft document I shared with you, I should say this is draft. We've been working on this for just a few days. I met with the admin team yesterday evening to review. It's a dynamic environment, and so I imagine some of these pieces will change, but I'm going to give you our first draft thinking. A broad goal here in trying to enact this reduction is to spread the decrease across the entirety of the budget. Okay, so I'm going to try to avoid the elimination of any single program, and I'll talk you through those details in just a minute. When we make reductions, we keep an eye on a few things. So we have to protect health and safety. We try to match resources with core beliefs, vision, and strategic objectives. And we try to the best we're able to minimize impact on students and staff. We try to protect programs if we can. We need to ensure mandated curriculum. We need to comply with state and federal mandates, and we certainly continue to try find efficiencies or savings wherever we might. So this is not in rank order. So I sent you a draft document on Sunday. It's changed since then. It'll continue to change. So I'm just going to talk through each of the items. So the first is group insurance, and we're looking at a potential reduction of about $350,000 there. I say potential for two reasons. One, as you know, we went out to bid for a new carrier earlier this year. The bid proposals are back. We had a finalist meeting with 2 carriers this week, and there's an alternate carrier who has come forward with a very, very aggressive competitive proposal. And so we're vetting that now. I will have a recommendation for the board when next we meet, but looking at the numbers, a change could result in about $150,000 reduction right off the top in this year, and then some much more significant savings in the next over the next 2 years. So that's one piece of that. The other piece is tied to staff reduction. So you'll see embedded in this there is a series of staff reductions. Most staff carry health insurance, so when we reduce people, in addition to the salary savings that we pick up, there's oftentimes a benefit pickup, so there's a cascading effect. So the remainder of that comes from potential savings if all of those staff are reduced. Make sense?
So the 350 that you have here is a cumulative over 3 years.
No, this is in fiscal 24.
This is fiscal 24.
Yes.
Is the 350.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
With because here it says the first year. Okay.
Yeah. So what that means is if we switch to this other carrier, there are significant savings potential in year 2, so it would be fiscal 25.
Okay.
Year 3, fiscal 26.
Okay.
I will give you all of that soup to nuts on the 20th.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what that means. Again, because the staffing changed, we can reduce the defined contribution line a bit. That's 10,000. FICA also 12,712. The next line we're looking at is the additional timeline. We're proposing a reduction of 10,000 there. The impact, that would really be our summer program offering or some of our summer curriculum days. Those are days that we use. We bring teachers and other staff members together to write and prepare curriculum. We would just look at offering fewer days. So I don't think we have our enrollment numbers solid yet for the summer programs we're proposing. We might be able to pick up some savings if the numbers don't pan out the way that we might be anticipating. In terms of the impact of writing or revising curriculum, the choice we'll have to make if we can't get it done this summer is try to carve out time during the school year, or it gets deferred to summer 24. I'm proposing a 0.4 reduction to our administrative staff line. This is $74,788. Our wonderful and amazing friend Kampar is stepping back. She's semi-retiring, and what we initially thought we would do. Fran works more than full-time, and so you need to know that. I know you already know that. She is responsible for a long list of really powerful and important work that takes place here in the Wilton schools. But Fran is stepping back. I'd hope to, kind of backfill that 0.4 because we still have work that's got to get done. But just given the magnitude of the cut, I don't see how we can do that. And so I'm just proposing that we just don't fill that 0.4. So we have some work to do in planning around that partial vacancy. Fran is responsible for a great deal of things. The digital learning program, which you've heard a lot about over the years, our library learning commons, television production, participating in the Area 9 Cable Council. I see that in my future, Fran.
You're going to those meetings.
STEM curriculum review, data security. Fran coordinates all of the technology instructional leaders and the work that they do in the schools, webmasters, and certainly not least, Fran's fingerprints are all over our Portrait of a Graduate work. So there's a lot. So this is, a true loss. From substitutes, we would look to take 9,500. This is actually out of the custodial subline, and so as Marianne has been doing her analyses, this is based on actual. She feels comfortable that we can reduce this line. So just to clarify, because we've had our own issues with kind of the general classroom teacher substitutes, that's not where we are drawing a reduction. The cafeteria aid line, Marianne's proposing 10,000 there too, and again that's based on actuals, and so she feels like we can take 10 out of that line. We're proposing to eliminate one custodian position, so that would be $61,000. The result, really would be that the remaining custodians would have to be responsible for a larger area. So Jose's working on that plan now. We have our head custodian here at the high school is retiring in a couple of weeks, and so we won't fill that position. I'm anticipating that the head position, will be backfilled by somebody internally, and it would create another position vacancy. So probably at the end of the shifting, it'll probably be a night custodial position someplace that wouldn't be filled.
Kevin, they just had their contract filled. Are we going to have issues?
No, because the contract doesn't stipulate how many. It's just salary agreement.
But are they not going to argue about now we've increased their territory?
Yeah.
I don't see how that would be a contract issue because that's not fixed in the contract. But it'll be, we're going to increase the workload, and, one of Jose's charges will be how to manage that across the custodians in any given building on any given night. We had a proposal to add clerical support to our facilities. We were originally proposing 1.0. This was a position that we eliminated from the budget a couple of years ago. And, at the time, we were going to try to manage it with part-time and patch it together with other people. It's just not working well. And, this is an area where sometimes we make decisions and try to be efficient. And, the efficiency we gain really doesn't pan out in good work product. So we had proposed to add the 1.0 back. Just given where we are, what I'm proposing to do is just reduce that 1.0 to a 0.6. And so, we'll continue to manage, but he does need some more dedicated support to ensure that the whole department runs really smoothly. We're looking at the equivalent of 2.0 library paraprofessional reductions. Right now we have about 1.5 or 1.6 in each building. And so what I said to Fran and to the rest of the administrators is let's see if we can manage with 1.0. And so this would be, a true reduction across buildings. Fran's, I don't want to speak for her, but just to summarize our conversation, concerned about the reduction and just the staffing and the services in the library, most concerned about the impact here. So this is something we're going to just keep a close eye on as we go through this process of finalizing recommendations. And so I may come back to you the next time we meet and say, all right, maybe it's not 2.0, maybe it's 1.5, and here's how I'm going to manage, the balance of the cost. We're looking at a reduction of what I would describe as the equivalent of 1.0 certified here at the high school. In speaking with Bob, it's likely that, as he is doing this sectioning for next year, we would take some partial FTE from each of the departments, point 1, point 2. Those impacted departments, that we're not looking at any kind of significant enrollment change over from year to year. The incoming 8th grade class is roughly the same size as the outgoing 12th grade class, so there will be some increased class sizes as a result in those impacted departments. That's not clear yet what it's going to look like. We won't really know until we've finalized the sectioning. I may have a better update for you in a few weeks. We're proposing to reduce 1.0 instructional coach at Miller Driscoll. Here too, there's been lots and lots of conversation about the professional learning program involving coaches. For my money, we get a lot of bang for our buck with that program. Really what we would be doing is just shifting the caseload, so the remaining instructional coaches in that building would pick up more responsibilities.
Can I make a comment about that?
You can.
I'm not really in favor of eliminating it at Miller Driscoll. The model there seems to work. Our teachers seem to appreciate it. I'd rather look at reducing it at Middlebrook. My other comment about that is, since it doesn't seem like our reading waiver is going to be accepted, that we are then having to pay for a very, very costly program, and Miller Driscoll is going to need the support. And I'd rather see the coach stay there.
They're all going to need the support. I think, I'll just take the feedback, and Chuck, we can kind of evaluate it, and we'll look at the whole program. In terms of other reductions, we've got a couple of different possibilities here that we're exploring, which would amount to the equivalent of a 1.0 certified. So one possibility could be to reduce a classroom section at grade 5. That would increase class sizes from 20.2 to 21.7. I'm not in favor of that, and so I think given my druthers, that's not where I would go, but I wanted you to understand the different scenarios we're looking at. Another possibility to achieve that reduction would be to eliminate both of the 0.5 science certified positions, one's at Miller Driscoll, one's at Cider Mill. If we were to do that, the classroom teachers would have to assume the responsibilities for science instruction. That's not a great option either. None of these are great options. A third that we're exploring is to reduce the 0.6 strings position for a year at Cider Mill. So the teacher that's in this role right now is out on leave for the next year, and so this could be, it's an unpaid leave, so it could be a 1-year reprieve. She is primarily responsible for 3rd grade strings. As I started with, I'm not really interested in eliminating 3rd grade strings, so Chuck and I are going to sit with the FAPA folks when we come back from the break and talk about some possibilities about how we might reconfigure things so we can still provide 3rd grade strings. I just don't know if that's a possibility, but it's a position we're looking at. To get to the dollar amount that we are pursuing, in addition to the 3rd grade strings, we would also propose to eliminate the 0.5 science para position. So at each Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill, there is some partial para support that helps set up those labs and supports the teacher. We would have to let go of those 2 positions. So the benefit would we'd be able to keep the 2 5 science teachers, but it's a trade-off. Moving down the list here, we are proposing to reduce classified staff overtime. We provide summer clerical days just to catch up with all of the office work, and so it's not a major reduction, but it's a reduction nonetheless. The next item, Eric Hawkinson and I talked to. As you know, we have a computer and Chromebook replacement plan, and so we were slated to purchase new computers for our instructional staff at one of the buildings this year. Eric has some computers that are still in service. He has invested some money to replace the motherboards in those machines to keep them functioning. And so what we would propose is we just go another year with the machines the teachers have, and if they break or need to be replaced, he can swap them out with these other machines that have the new motherboards in it. That'll get us likely another year of service. And so the impact there is we're extending our replacement plan cycle and pushing everything off a year. We've been tracking the athletic gate receipts. Bobby has done a good job of, with ticket sales, and so just tracking actuals, we feel like we can add an additional $5,000 in revenue that will actually be generated from game receipts. This will look familiar to you. We're proposing again to reduce our library book replacement budget by $3,000 at each school. The net impact here is we will increase the age of our collection because we're not going to be replacing as many books with new books, and we'll have fewer new titles. One of the upside, if you like, is Cider Mill, as you know, had the flood, and most of our collection was wiped out. So that collection will probably be the newest by the time we're done. We won't be expanding the number of new titles, but the age at least will be more current than where it is. We're sitting right now between the average age is somewhere between 2008 and 2009.
Mm-hmm. It's old.
Yeah. So along the same lines, we feel like the furniture replacement budget is victimized annually, and so we're not eliminating it, but we are reducing it at each school. And so what does that do? It just slows our replacement plan. We're looking at a minor reduction to the total special education services lines. So there's a range of possibilities. One is to decrease 12-month secretary to 10 months. There is an opportunity. The state recently released a grant of $10,000 or $12,000 to support the conversion to CT SEDS. That's the new state-mandated IEP program. And so we're just proposing to supplant a locally funded stipend with that stipend. That would be 1 year. So that's about $10,000 or $12,000. And then we are looking at slightly reducing the contracted services line. Andrea and I talk about this all the time, and in every single conversation, she reminds me, this is true. If we exceed our budget and need to provide mandated special education services, the money's got to come from someplace, and if that happens, we might be in a similar scenario where we have to freeze a budget and draw some funds from some other non-SPED lines to cover those costs. Similarly, we're reducing some district contract services. This comes out of Chuck's budget. So we've been working with a professional on one of our strategic planning goals, and so we would be reducing the amount of time we would engage with that person over the next year. We reduced training and conferences in one round of reductions earlier that I just explained. We're proposing another reduction of $25,000. Chuck is working with the administrative staff to finalize all of that, but those are trainings and opportunities, just across departments, and so it's quite a lengthy list. The last piece here is we're looking at, across the district, we're proposing to reduce clubs, activities, and intramurals by about half. And so the way that I'm imagining this is we run clubs and activities in all of our buildings. And so, again, not wanting to eliminate anything, what we're proposing, the way I'm conceiving of this is we can run some clubs, but we're going to have fewer sessions. By about half. So that'll be how it operationalizes in some places. Bob and the high school team have been looking at their club and activity list, and so they have a slightly different way to approach that. And so they're looking at participation rates, so there may be some clubs that don't run at all, or depending on participation rates, there may be a different frequency or set of intervals by which the clubs meet, just depending on student usage. So again, those are kind of preliminary. Altogether, they get us to the $1.4 million reduction. I think, probably if I had to kind of summarize, that's probably about what I'll come back to you and recommend, but there may be some shifts and tweaks just as we continue to scrub. And, as I said, it's dynamic, so, there may be other opportunities with staffing as we learn about, retirements or resignations or things like that. The remaining three items here, I've listed that we may want to explore an increase to the activity fee. I'm not recommending that for fiscal '24, but I think it's something that the board that we should think about. If we're going to reduce clubs and activities by 50%, it does not make sense to me that we raise the price and tell people you're paying more for less. And so I think, big picture, that might be something we need to think about. Right now, the lower schools charge a $25 activity fee, and then the high school charges a $50 activity fee. I would also, suggest that we explore the pay to participate and consider increasing that. I don't think it's, I'm not recommending we do that now. I think we need to take some time. And I say that because we work with our, various booster clubs, but we don't have really good clarity yet on the complete picture of the contributions. And so I'd like to come back to the board with Bobby with some greater analysis so we can all see just the complete picture of how all of our athletics are funded and just make a decision based on, a complete set of information. And then...
Question about that?
Yeah.
How long does that take? I feel like we've been talking about this for a while.
Well, it's on my to-do list, and it's at the bottom. So I just, with everything else that we've had to do, I just haven't been able to make any material headway. But you're right, it's not a new thought. And yeah, so I think if we're going to seriously think about this for the next round for fiscal '25, and I just in the full conversation about this, I haven't heard from this board as a body that there's been an appetite to really go after this. But I think let's look at it, and then you guys can deliberate on the information you have.
Since I sat on the board that implemented pay to participate, and Chris Finkelstein and I had a study group that studied it. It was very hard to get information from the booster clubs. Several booster clubs would only talk to me if I promised never to reveal what I learned. But it was, interesting, and also to look at the neighboring towns and what they charged, and there's definitely things to be explored there.
Yeah, and there are vast differences.
And you've been
right?
talking about finding information from the booster club since you started in 2014, so.
It's not easy.
What percentage of activity fees do we actually collect? Is there a mechanism in place for collecting them all?
Yeah, I'd have to just pull the information, the participation, and look at the collection rate. So I can't tell you what that number is today.
Anecdotally, it's always, when the kids are trying to buy their prom tickets.
Yeah, I think it's high.
They're like, what?
Do you have some insight on that? No, it's not the total amount. It's the percentage. So do we have kids that participate but don't pay? That's, I think, the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, I can look at that. The last piece, and I offer this not because I have any interest in going after this, but if we're taking across-the-board cuts, then, I think we need to look at athletics too. I have no recommendation. I'm not supporting a cut to athletics, but I think, big picture, and, as we start to think about, fiscal 25, fiscal 26, if we are going to find ourselves in, positions where we're really scrambling for dollars, then we need to look at it all. Happy to take some questions.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. If we're going to consider cutting athletics, then we should sooner rather than later talk about increasing the pay to play to see what it would come up with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, but if Kevin's talking about the reduction to athletics being a few years down the road, then there would be time to...
I thought it was a reduction for this coming.
I'm not proposing.
That's what you're hoping not to do.
Well, so just if you look at this list, there are no numbers behind any of those last three items. And so we don't need to, I'm not recommending action on any of those three to get us to the reduction we need. So that's my point. Like, I think you're absolutely right. Like, we need to understand the universe of, kind of booster contributions, other parent in-kind contributions. As a parent of two high school athletes, I feel like my wallet's always open. And I say that, lovingly. Like, I'm happy to support, but I've never sat down and really had a complete understanding of all of the inputs here, and I think that would be important before, I would make a recommendation or would ask you to make a decision on it.
But there's time to study pay for play before anything like that happens.
Sounds good, but we're going to have an issue with our community if we're going to cut strings, and you're not going to cut athletics or even talk about cutting athletics, and we're also going to talk about cutting science labs, but we're not going to cut athletics, right? Hey, look, my kids play sports. I'm not interested in cutting athletics. If we're going to be fair across the board, it's hard. Only a certain number of kids play athletics. Every kid goes through science class. So
Right.
Right? So somehow there's got to be some give somehow.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not eliminating science curriculum.
You're not. You're just eliminating the person in charge of the labs. We're putting it back on the teachers.
Yeah, and so with not without some support,
Right.
but it's a reduction, and yeah, I think Jen, your point's fair. We need to talk about all of it.
And I wouldn't mind understanding why string starts in 3rd grade, that band starts in 5th grade. There must be a reason for that.
I wonder if there's a way, because the kids do strings and then many of the kids quit strings to take up band in 5th grade.
Yeah.
So if there's a more efficient way of having loads of 3rd and 4th graders not give up strings somehow.
That was started with the music guy, Martin, no. What was his name? The one that used to do all those concerts in the October concert, and he'd wear the turban, and a great guy, but he was the one to start the strings in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think he thought that once they got a bit into it, that they would stick with it.
Yeah, I haven't asked for attrition numbers, but I'm sure that
It does happen.
Ken probably has them, right? So, yeah, so it's a good question.
It's a lot of loss.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of loss.
Is there any other information you want as we're just working through this process? I keep looking at you, Jen, I'm sorry. Look at Ruth.
Jen, you need
Nicola,
some
Pam.
seats.
I do. I am naturally oriented this way.
Each other.
Yes.
Like, yes, Kevin. We'll get back to, I'm sure people have questions, and
Yeah,
we'll
so
kind
fine.
of
So, and
digest
just-
all of this and kind of ask some questions.
And feel free, as you're looking at it, thinking about it, send them along, and we'll just catalog them like we do, and we'll continue to work through it. Are you ready for the next one?
No, I'm kind of depressed. Yeah. Which brings us to mental health and social and emotional learning.
So you've heard a lot about, mental health. We started the year with some really alarming data. I don't want to belabor this, and I don't have a presentation, but I do have a consideration for you. Over the course of the year, we've been tracking, our own students' wellness. Kim has been here a bunch of times reviewing the various screeners we use. Several weeks ago, we co-sponsored with Wilton Youth Services, some other youth-serving organizations. The Deputy Chief Rob Cipolla was also there as a panelist. This breakfast, Andrew Gerber, the president of Silver Hill, keynoted, and then we had a really good panelist conversation. There were probably close to 200 people in the room, and so it just
very good.
It was. I thought it was a helpful conversation. There's been some good movement, good partnership with the town in trying to provide resources, but the conversation didn't really get into or focus on root causes. And so what I'd like the board to think about, and I'll come back to you next time we meet with a more formalized proposal. I just want to drop the seed right now. I think we ought to consider creating a working group to really kind of dive into this. And, for my own interest, the kinds of questions I'm pursuing or interested in pursuing are really around trying to get underneath what is driving some of this lack of wellness we're seeing, among our kids, and why are we seeing more kids who are, really dysregulated, to the point where we have to call 211 or they're hospitalized or what have you. My instinct is there's a range of reasons, but I'd like to, if we can understand some, of the more primary drivers, then maybe we can program some better prevention. So that's one piece. I think going back to, the screen time question, again, as part of this conversation, I'd like to gather the research, look at and talk about the impact of social media, if to the extent screen time plays a role, and again come back to some policy discussion about what we might be able to do preventatively or proactively to try to just keep more kids from getting to a point where they want to self-harm. So if that is interesting to you, I wouldn't mind just some feedback on the concept, and then I can take some time to formalize it. And I think we have a recommendation coming up here in a second to create kind of a similar task force for communication. So in terms of how it would operate, I think there's a model there that we could play. A couple of board members, some community members. We'll have some guided questions, pull some experts, do some interviews with teachers, with kids, with families, with others, and just do some data analysis and see what it all yields.
Are there other districts grappling with the same questions?
100%. Yeah, this is not a Wilton issue, and we've talked. I would say, with the group of superintendents that I interact with, we talk around the issue and we share information, but we haven't collectively engaged. So I think if you're suggesting maybe we want to partner, I could certainly put that. Didn't have that idea in my head, but we could probably. I'm sure people would be interested, outside of Wilton.
Has the legislature got anything in the works?
Well, I know there are bills, and there were last year. It's been a major focus. Cece, can I interrupt you for a sec? So the topic is just mental health and just, bills that you're aware of in the legislature now that might be coming our way.
Yeah. So the SB2 is focused on children's mental health, and one of the aspects of it is setting up the Office of the Healthcare Advocate, so that because we've got a health advocate, but we don't have a behavioral health, so that will be so that providers have someone that can help them with insurance and covering costs, and then also that families will be able to go there as well and have someone that can help them perhaps with some navigating. We are very aware that there is an interstate compact being put together by National Association of Social Workers, which is to allow that people can take their licensing from one state into another, which is phenomenal.
Huge.
And then also, Connecticut had the highest licensing costs for social workers, so we've reduced the costs of that, and we've also increased the amount of time their license will last, so it's going to go from 1 year to 2 years. We were the highest in all of our area, so I have every expectation that that's going to go through. We also know those things are not enough. We know that we need to be doing more, and we're still talking about it. It is still a bill that is a work in progress.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that was the other, I mean, this wouldn't necessarily address pipeline problems with our, proposal, but that's something that's been a major, major issue that we've experienced here in this community.
So if people have thoughts in the coming days about issues or ideas or ways to explore it, as Kevin works on putting a more formal task force proposal together,
Yeah.
you should send them his way. Next on the agenda is review and discuss policy 6163.1, selection of school library materials.
Yeah, so this is the first read of this policy. The policy committee has been looking at this library material selection policy for some months, and it's a policy that's been in place for a long time, so it came up as part of our review. You'll recall we had some questions about some books that were displayed as part of Banned Books Week here back in September. So we reviewed the policy. The goal of the policy is to, just describe the purpose of the library materials and then define some processes for selection. And so that's what you see in the policy document. The regulation expounds on some of those procedures. It articulates selection criteria and who is responsible. And then it also speaks to how we would deal with challenged materials. So I would just invite you to, take some time, review it, as we do, generate your questions. This will be on again for the next meeting, and then, we can deal with questions, and then if we're ready to vote, we can vote.
Next is policy 3542.43, food service charging.
Right, so this policy change, we've had a food service charging policy for some time. The law has changed around this policy, so the language in the policy is catching up with both the law as well as our current practice. So what I mean by that is a year ago, the state legislature took this on and introduced what they colloquially refer to as like a no shaming provision. And so we've included that language. Practically, one of the changes that we had in our former policy was if a child reached a certain threshold and were charging beyond what they had in their account, they would be provided an alternate meal. So, 4 or 5 years ago, it was like a cheese sandwich, a piece of fruit, something else. So the law specifically prohibits that practice. I was very encouraged to learn our food service program gave up on that practice a while ago. So, they're actually ahead of the policy here. And so, again, we're just revising the language so that it's current with the law, current with our actual practice.
And the regulation just effectuates the policy changes.
Correct.
And then next, because we moved it up, so you might find it later on in your packets, is the policy 5145.1, suicide prevention and intervention.
Yeah, so this is another policy that the committee has been working through for some time. We've had a good policy in place for a long time. We went back as just part of the review. We often will look at CAVE model policies and Shipman model policies, and much of this existing policy reflected Shipman language, which was great. We rely on them quite a bit in terms of just making sure that our policy is aligns with the law. You'll see as you go through it, we have changed quite a bit of the language that was in our old policy and not really in alignment with the Shipman and Goodwin proposed model. Specifically, when you're looking at procedures, we had multiple categories of procedures, and as I read through them and I looked at the Shipman model, I looked at what our existing procedures were. There was just some unnecessary procedures in there, so we struck them. The other piece that wasn't in the policy that we added is the last piece. It's the suicide education and prevention for students and staff. we provide suicide prevention education, it just wasn't articulated in the policy. And so we're just catching up the language there. And then I guess just to complete that part of the conversation, the shipment model did not have a confidential report form. We have one that we look at, we use, and so we've kept that as part of the policy and the reg.
I think just to bring it to everyone's attention, because I don't know if the redlining brought up, but that new suicide education prevention, that's all new language. So even though it's not underlined or red, just so when you're reading it, you know that that's new.
And so first read for those other two, we'll keep them on the agenda, and then if we're ready to take action, we'll take action. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Policy Committee.
Next is possible action items. First up is the Middlebrook schedule change. Dory, if you want to stay where you are, come on down. Either one, however you're more comfortable.
Yeah. So in the policy, in the brief. As you are well aware, the team over there has been working on a schedule model proposal for a long time. It sounds there is consensus around a model that Jory presented the last time he was here, which is essentially a 7-drop 1. It feeds 60 minutes to our core classes and 40 minutes to our stride classes. The new schedule integrates ELA, and the current model that they're contemplating also allows for an 18-minute flex period during which students would be either independently reading, practicing mathematics, or the team would be using for team huddle time. As part of that, I've asked that we evaluate the use of those 18 minutes and then come back in the middle of the year with a recommendation about the efficacy of that time. As part of that change, we're able to add a new STEM robotics course, which Fran and her team is working on developing. So we'll have a 6141 before too long. And then, I think it's, one of the key goals through all of this beyond trying to get the necessary minutes of continuous instruction for ELA and math. One of the key features of that middle school is the team model, and so this model preserves the team, which is important. So I'm asking for a motion that the Board of Ed adopt this schedule proposed by the Middlebrook administration to be implemented in the 23-24 school year.
Any questions from the table?
I have one. Jory, how are we doing with staff and they're being okay with the changes in terms of how many hours they're teaching and whatnot? Has that all been settled and everybody is in a good place?
I think we're in a great place. There are specifics of working around when IETs are going to need and prep periods and that, but it's minor in the grand scheme of things of what we're talking about here, and I'm very confident that those minor details will be set very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have a third, not a fourth meeting with some of the union leadership just to make sure we're on the same page. I may have to break, I believe. It was a date proposed today, so I think that's fine.
Yeah, so just to be it's not settled, but I think he's right to be optimistic.
Okay. Are we going to regret this decision?
No.
That's what I'm asking. Should we be voting on this right now, or do you guys want to settle all that first?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's
Okay.
Anybody else? Is there then a motion that the Board of Education adopt the schedule proposed by the Middlebrook administration to be implemented by the 23-24 school year?
Can I just say so moved?
Yes.
I guess that's a lot to remember.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
I think they're ready.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. My soon-to-be 6th grader is looking forward to it. Next item is discussion of and approval of project Open Choice.
So if it's okay, just to kick off the conversation, I've just prepared some remarks. They're lengthy, so I apologize in advance, but I think, given the volume of communication, it merits.
Agreed.
So it goes without saying, there's been a great deal of communication about this, and many in our community have expressed strong sentiments either in support or in opposition. I want to be unequivocal in my own position here. So I support Project Open Choice, and I am recommending to the board that you vote to participate. As we've discussed, the goals of the program are to reduce racial, ethnic, and economic isolation, to improve academic achievement, and to provide a choice of educational programs. As you already know, for Wilton, we would be drawing students from Norwalk. I've spoken to Alexandra Estrella, the superintendent there, and she is in support of this program and looks forward to partnering with us if you adopt this program. As I've proposed, we would open 3 seats in kindergarten and 2 seats in first grade for the fiscal 23-24 school year. What this would mean is that 3 kindergarten classrooms and 2 first grade classrooms would each have 1 additional student should we receive 5 students. We've tried to keep class sizes on the lower end of our averages historically, especially as we've worked through the pandemic. Adding 3 students in kindergarten and 2 in first grade does not dramatically impact the overall class size average. Looking at the projected enrollment for kindergarten and first grade for the next year, we're anticipating average class sizes of 19.6 and 19.8 respectively. Adding 3 to kindergarten would mean an average class size of 19.8, and then adding 2 first grade would create an average class size of 20. For those classrooms with an open choice student, it means 1 more student for that teacher. For some classrooms, teachers will have 20 instead of 19. These numbers are not outside our typical class size range. Given the varying needs and compositions of classrooms, we'll likely to continue to have classes that range from 18 to 21. The principals work with their team to look at the kids as they know them, and they tweak those accordingly. Teachers are accustomed to classes of this size, and so here too, even though it would mean having 1 more student in each of those classes, I really don't anticipate the additional student would have a deleterious impact on the class or the teacher. The opportunity for our students in those classrooms is that they get to meet and potentially become friends with someone with a background that's different from theirs. This is a very good thing for our students. Keith referenced it in his comments earlier. I read the letter, and I was really interested to read it. So there was a graduate, as you heard, who attended the Wilton schools as a participant in Project Concern. In that letter, he described lifelong friendships that developed in his early years as a student, and I have no doubt that his friends appreciate their friendships with him in the same way. Moreover, he articulated the opportunities he had and attributes them to participation in the program, which highlights the other significant opportunity participation in Open Choice provides. Students who may otherwise be economically, racially, or ethnically isolated get to participate in our school program. So the way I view it is we have the opportunity to change life trajectories and improve outcomes for these kids. With respect to cost, if you haven't read it, and I hope you all did, I would encourage you to look at Lynn's op-ed piece that ran this morning in Good Morning Wilton. As she was here and said earlier, her piece describes the negligible financial impact as well as anyone can describe it. In many of the letters of opposition, people were confusing our per-pupil expenditure with the actual cost of educating 1 more student in a classroom. I'll just say for the record, if the program was actually going to add $23,000 per participant per year to our budget, given the conversation we've just had, and for those of you who know the way that I work, it's not a program I would ever support. And so I just don't see the math working out that way. The incremental cost of adding 5 open choice students is not 5 times our per pupil expenditure. Our per pupil expenditure is derived by taking the total cost of our public school operation and dividing it by the total enrollment. So for 2022, our per pupil expenditure, the average, is $22,980. And so just to, kind of illustrate this, I would just ask you to consider, we experience enrollment fluctuations annually. Those fluctuations do not result in a straight line increase or decrease in per pupil expenditure multiplied by whatever it is. It just doesn't work that way. So losing 5 students doesn't result in a cost reduction of $22,980 times 5 or $114,000. Lynn's example that she cited was accurate. When we've had minor changes in enrollment at a grade level, we have not added or subtracted staff. With the proposed addition of 5 students spread across 2 grade levels, we're not adding new staff. Because the class average is already in our typical range, we possess the furniture and the materials already. And just to complete the point, the per pupil expenditure average includes all expenses across the district, including, for example, transportation, special education outplacement, and utilities. All are included in that PPE, but none of them would be impacted by adding an open choice student. Okay, so you obviously see the difference. As we've discussed and has been reported to me from other towns that participate, one of the challenges that open choice students do have is participation in the life of the school community beyond the school day. Recently, CES has begun to address this with open choice students who attend Trumbull Public Schools by creating additional van runs so students can engage in after-school activities. As Chip and I have spoken about this, that's a pilot, and so I know they've heard this feedback and they're interested in trying to do something in other places. I don't know what that could mean in terms of CES for us, but other people are thinking about this concern too. So as Lynn was just describing, earlier, and as she noted in her letter, these expenses that might come with participating in activities outside of the school day, those are not expenses that our school district should or would bear. And they're in the room, so I'm going to say thank you. We have 2 families, so Paul and Lynn, Chris and Catherine have stepped forward and have pledged substantial contributions to ensure that these students can fully participate in the life of the school community. So I just want to say I'm grateful for your support. As we've already discussed, but was worth repeating, I'm asking the board to vote on accepting 5 students for the next school year only. So this was another just point of confusion that we heard in some of the communication. Continuing to accept open choice students would be an annual decision based on enrollment and our experience with the program. So I would ask that nobody assume that we're going to take 5 students every year in perpetuity. Next year's recommendation would be based on enrollment projections and whatever our experience is over the next year. I've received some repeated commentary that Westport budgets something on the order of $1 million to address costs related to open choice. A while ago, when I first heard that, I asked the superintendent about this, and his answer was clear. He said they don't have a line item of $1 million or anything to support open choice students open choice students. I called him again this morning just to confirm, and his answer was exactly the same. There is no $1 million budget line in Westport to support open choice students. He went on to say he has just no idea where that came from. And just to repeat some information that I've shared previously, students in receiving districts also have the opportunity to attend schools in the sending districts. As you know, we do send some students to the Norwalk Magnet program. The Regional Education Service Center, that's CES, is responsible for administering this program. When there are more students than seats available, selection is done through a weighted lottery. This lottery has generated some questions, and what Chip reiterated to me was, no, it's weighted to ensure that the program's goal of reducing racial, ethnic, and economic isolation is met. As you know, the state provides a modest financial incentive for local boards of education that volunteer to participate. So districts receive $3,000 per student that they receive. That incentive is provided when the total number of participating students is less than 2% of the receiving district's population. That's, where we would be. And then the per student grant would increase if the participating student number exceeds 2% of the total population. The district also receives additional ECS funds based on a per pupil allotment. And then, as we've talked about already, transportation is provided at no cost to the receiving district. CES manages that. Should a student require special education services, the sending district pays the amount equal to the difference between the cost of services and the grant paid by the state. Let me just skip through some of these things. So let me just talk about that for a second. So operationally, we would define reasonable costs as, any costs above basic special education services, which we would identify as services like weekly learning center support in a small group setting, a social skills group, support from a special education teacher in the general education classroom setting. If a student's PPT recommended additional services, so speech and language, OT, PT, paraprofessional services, counseling, ESY, or pull-out direct instruction, those costs would be tabulated and billed to the sending district.
Kevin, sorry, can you repeat the beginning of that paragraph?
Sure. So reasonable costs, right? Things like basic special education, anything above basic special education services. Support in small group setting. Social skills group. Support from a special education teacher in the general education classroom. So if you can imagine, services that might be provided in a group that are being provided anyway, anything that would be more singular, one-on-one, those would be the extraordinary services for which we would bill. Would you add to that?
Yes, I think that the issue becomes, for example, when a special ed teacher is providing services in a general ed classroom, they provide services, I like to think of it as a rising tide raises all ships. So we work with the kids who have needs in that room. So if there is a student in that room who happens to be a part of the open choice program, they would benefit from that special ed teacher's expertise in helping with the executive functioning and whatnot. That would be the reasonable cost of special ed services as it applies to all kids. When the IEP that gets developed starts to have higher levels of special education, pull-out service, related services, you name it, speech and language, OT, PT, counseling, you name it. If there are extended evaluation issues, psychiatric evaluations, those kinds of things, and ultimately if a student required an outplacement, that would become the total cost of that would be borne by the sending district. I had experience with this in Fairfield. We were part of Open Choice. It was not, we did not see a higher percentage of students in Open Choice being identified as students with special needs than among the typical population. Does that make sense? So you're thinking about, 12 to 15% of the population. You're going to maybe have one of those 5 students at some point in their career might need special education services. But it's not, it wasn't anything outside of the realm of typical, that we would typically see proportionally for special education. And we had no issues with billing back the services. We received the funding. It was not an issue.
And so as I've talked to my colleagues around the region and across the state, you've probably read some of the articles that illustrated, the conflict between Woodbridge and New Haven. That sounds like it was a complete outlier relative to just about everybody else's experience that participate. More locally, I had a lot of conversation with the superintendents in both Weston and Westport, and both of them reported there's no problem there. And so I spoke with the director of special services in Westport, and he said, exactly what Andrea just described. Like, it's very routine. There's no issue when they bill for services. In this case, it was Bridgeport. Bridgeport always pays, and there's just never been an issue. And so, given their experience, we have a good working relationship with Norwalk already. I don't see that there's going to be an issue here. Again, we're talking about, at least to begin, a very small handful of kids. So that I'll just kind of.
Did you have another?
Oh, sorry.
You want me to follow up with my questions, or you want me to wait?
It's up to
I
you.
can wait.
Yeah, whatever. I just got to get it all out.
Get it all
right? So let me just last little bit here. From my perspective, I clearly see the potential educational benefit, and we already know that Wilton has a rich history of educating students from urban environments. Participating in open choice would support our goals around the portrait of graduate, specifically the attribute of developing active, socially sensitive citizens, creating more opportunities, as we've heard and read from one of the letters of our graduates, creating opportunities for our students to interact and form relationships with individuals with diverse backgrounds and experiences will absolutely enrich their educational experience. So from where I sit, the goals make sense, the economics make sense, and this is truly a program that aligns with the values that I think we hold as a community. And so happy to take your questions.
Let me just ask before I forget. I wrote it down now. So the other questions I was asked, 504 plans would not go to ascending district, I'm assuming.
504 plans don't provide direct service
Individual. That's why I said no.
99.99% of the time. They are reasonable accommodations.
Yep.
So they're not, they have no additional cost to bear. So they would not, there's no cost to charge. There's no services directed under a 504 plan. It's typically reasonable accommodations for students with disabilities.
Great. I just wanted you to say it. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks. The other question is ESL. How would that be?
Yeah, there's no provision under the law to bill for extraordinary ESL services. And so we have 2 ELL teachers in the district, and if students required ELL services, these students would become part of their caseload.
Okay. So we're increasing an already heavy caseload.
If the need is there.
Right.
Again, in my experience,
Yep.
the services for ELL students, I know we call them ML now.
MLLs.
We have new letters. The services are better in the urban setting, so very few of those families come this way. They get better services in the urban centers.
Yeah, and I think the other just piece, if you track child development, if you have kids with second language needs in the early grade, our program is immersion, and my experience has been kids pick up the language much more readily when they're 5, 6, 7 years old than when they're 14, 15, 16. And so I think part of the benefit would just be in a language rich environment with English speaking peers.
All right, my last comment or question regarding special ed. How confident are you guys knowing that Wilton's idea of special education and what our students need is very different from Norwalk? How confident are we that Norwalk is going to say whatever you guys want, we're going to cover?
They have no choice. They're not part of the PPT that makes those decisions. That student becomes our student, our PPT. We make the decisions about what they need in collaboration with their parents, obviously, in the full PPT process, and we just bill back. We don't invite Norwalk to the meeting. They don't weigh in. That's not part of the process.
Okay.
We just call them and say, we send them the bill. That's it.
They never fight that bill, they never...
In my experience in Fairfield, over 20 years, I think I had one time when the supervisor in Bridgeport questioned the nature of the IEP, and then it was a phone call and a conversation. And once we explained what the need was, it was a non-issue.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would rely on too. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a relationship with this district. We have other agreements, and so I don't. To answer your question, I don't foresee an issue.
And I think Chip, when he was at our meeting last time, Chip from CES, said he had never, he would be CES would be the group that would be intervening when there was an issue, and he'd never had any experience having to do,
But
intervene.
if my
in those.
office communicates and we don't agree, then CES becomes the arbitrator of that.
No, you explained it at our last meeting pretty well. I was just curious if the district, the sending district objected to what was deemed that they were gonna have to pay, and whether they had a recourse or there was a system for them to say, we're not gonna pay that. We don't wanna pay that, that's too much.
There's a conflict resolution system that CES arbitrates,
Yeah.
but I never had to use it in the 21 years I was in Fairfield, never once.
That's good to know.
I think the frustrating part for some people in our community is the whole Woodbridge situation, right? And if CES was really in charge of it and could have taken care of that,
CES,
we're in a different
then I think that
regional
as a people
education.
don't all understand.
Yeah, so CES had nothing to do with that.
Right.
It's a different RESC up there. I forget which one it is. Well, Craig's Hartford. I don't know, ACES. Hampton, so is it ACES? So it's different regional coordinator. There are other, these are the things that don't make the headlines either, right? So, the superintendent at Woodbridge is brand new. And so, she, didn't have a lot of interaction with the program, or, just the whole experience is new. So, I don't know, what was going on the New Haven side, but I just think there are other factors that contributed to, the headlines that we all read. And, in places where you've got, seasoned and experienced people on both sides of the table willing to, have a conversation, then you get a lot of places. And so I think Andrea's experience is probably more reliable than, what happened once in north of here.
But I don't think we can say enough that we're in a different regional educational district than Woodbridge and New Haven, and that, CES, and we had someone here from CES, and so we just need to, that's the answer to the Woodbridge that's, in our regional, district, that has not been an issue.
Yeah, and I guess, Woodbridge has also, again, participated for, this program's been in place for a while, so this just sounds like it was an outlier.
Right, and also because we can observe what happens in another region, we can be alert to it and how to address it.
Right. I know everybody keeps talking about the Westport money. I think, just like I would never expect our budget to have a line item for students that we take in for open choice, I doubt, and I agree, that Westport doesn't have one either. I think the comment came from people that said that there was an increase in staffing, the need for social workers and whatnot.
Mhm.
And some open choice students were roped into all of that. You don't even need to respond. I'm just sharing with you that's what the background is to some of that, and that's where I think the information was coming that was shared with some people.
Okay, and I can only share the conversations I had with the superintendent in Weston and Westport, and they're saying no additional costs. So, if there are other things that I'm not aware of, or maybe he's not aware of, then I can't even respond to it.
Yeah, nope, I agree. I think it's, I've spoken with board members from Westport, from New Canaan, from Ridgefield. I've heard from teachers. I've talked to students. I've read a lot about open choice. I even tried to fill out the application because people had questions about, nobody talked about how much money, how much money families made. Every stakeholder has a different viewpoint, right? And I think everybody around this table needs to truly understand that. And I think that people look at this as being a win and a win, but people don't look at the other side of it sometimes, and I don't think that that's fair. I have plenty to say. I'm sure, does anybody else here have anything to say, or is this really going to be on me?
No, I think we're all
everybody
going to
has
have a turn.
So if you'd like to go first, we can go around the table, if you want to keep going.
I don't need to go first. I know Mandy wrote in something, and she would like to share her opinions. But I'm happy to have you guys go and talk in, and I can piggyback and ask my questions.
I think we should all just go around the table individually.
Do you want to start with Mandy? Do you want to?
Sure.
That's fine. I'll read it.
Okay.
Apologies I could not be here tonight, but hope all are celebrating, have a generous Ramadan, happy Passover, and happy Easter. I cannot be here tonight because I am on a plane right now to celebrate Easter weekend with my family. This is one of the reasons I emailed the board on March 16th, March 31st, and April 3rd requesting we change the date of this meeting. As this is a week filled with religious celebrations and school vacations, I am a bit upset that we have chosen tonight to discuss this. When so many are out of town or celebrating, and bewildered that I never received an email from the BOE chair responding to my 3 emails requesting we move this meeting and or remove the voting potential for tonight on what could be a decision that impacts decades of future students and taxpayers. I do not support us voting on open choice tonight. This is a large decision for our town, and as seen by the 150 so letters we have received, there is extreme interest. We as a board have not even had a proper discussion. How are we going to vote on this tonight at last? There is an extreme lack of clarity surrounding who will cover all costs for special education. How can we possibly enter long-term commitment with another town with no memorandum of understanding or no legal clarification who is paying for what? As Kevin stated to the local open choice representative at our March 16th meeting regarding costs of special education, the law speaks to the receiving district covering reasonable cost and the sending district covering costs beyond reasonable. There is, as Kevin stated, no monetary definition of reasonable cost. This gray area leaves Wilton taxpayers incredibly vulnerable. There are gray areas around so much of open choice. At the March 16th meeting, when the open choice representative was discussing transportation, he mentioned Norwalk students staying after school in Wilton for activities and getting on our late bus as most towns have. We do not have a late bus for after-school activities. Are we now creating a new late bus system? Who is paying for that? Kevin mentioned that perhaps the PTA could take care of transporting our students. Is that our plan? Have parents step forward to volunteer for that? As of today, we cannot guarantee or even offer an estimate of cost to Wilton taxpayers for this program for next year or beyond, and this is fiscally irresponsible, especially in a year when we cannot even get our own current BOE budget with solely Wilton students through the BOF. If we can spend the next year coming up with an MOU or legal documentation with Norwalk that clearly outlines who is paying for what, and if we can further understand who Norwalk will be choosing for this program, as it is not a lottery since it is weighted for socioeconomic, race, and ethnicity selections, then and only then we should move forward with open choice. As Kevin stated in the March 2nd BOE meeting, if this is something we are not ready for, we can pass. I agree with Kevin for this year we should pass and instead spend the year defining agreed upon terms with Norwalk for all costs to the Wilton taxpayers. Why are we rushing into a legal commitment with no terms? Let's slow down and do this the right way that protects our budget. In the meantime, I propose we increase our ABC students to increase the ABC scholars in our schools and further increase the diversity for next year. We currently have 5 female ABC scholars. Could we double that? Offer slots to 5 males with private funding for next year? I would love to work directly with the Board of Directors for ABC Wilton to increase fundraising in support of ABC, a program with a data-supported track record of academic success and private fundraising. Please let us use our brains and not our politics to move forward with open choice, the smart way for Wilton kids, Norwalk's kids, and our community. Again, this is feeling rushed and it is a good starting point for this conversation versus an ending point. We have at least one lawyer on our board. I can imagine she would suggest a private client enter a 13-year commitment without financial transparency or protection. Why would we do that to our town? Based on my above thoughts, my vote for tonight moving forward with open choice is a no in abstention. Under the bylaws, we don't allow absentee voting. P.S. As a recent discussion regarding the Meadowbrook schedule, when asked how many letters the BOE had received in favor of and opposing the schedule, no one knew the answer and Ruth was not willing to guesstimate. I am attaching a document with the quantity of letters in support and opposition of open choice that the BOE has received as of 2 p.m. today when I had to leave to catch my flight. As of 2 p.m., we had received 172 letters total, 107 opposing, 65 supporting. Fondly, Mandy Schma.
My only comment to her note is the fact that we don't take people's responses when they're not going to be here. I don't know why we would have a discussion and a vote on something of this magnitude when an entire board is not here. Everybody knew she couldn't be here, yet here we are, still talking about this and still possibly voting on it.
I was not at the board meeting when you guys approved the meeting schedule for this year. I have in the past missed this meeting if it conflicted with Monday, Thursday services at my church. Since I'm only on the board for less than a year, I thought I would choose the Board of Ed over that this year. And I think, you know, we meet up the first and third Thursdays. I mean, I think we've been doing that since time began in Wilton. You know, and so I think that's something to be addressed, and maybe maybe next year at the organizational meeting, everyone should look at the calendar going forward, and say,
Fully agree. We all should have actually looked at the dates.
Yes.
And made sure that there was not a commitment, a conflict. But knowing after the fact that there was one, the fact that that we couldn't figure out another date, or the fact that we wouldn't push this, and realizing we probably have to give an answer by, I thought you said the 15th last time, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's next week.
Right? Like, I get it, but there are plenty of other options.
In all fairness to that, the proposed alternative date was last night, where we've always had Thursdays on our calendar and calendared for a year. That is also another religious holiday. And in addition to that, to postpone it till our next meeting, I know that all members of the board are not available at that meeting either.
You guys could have shared some additional options for dates instead of shooting it down. That's all I'm saying, and we don't need to belabor this conversation or this topic, and that's my point. That's all I have to say about it.
And all I have to say about it is that dates have been shared and been consistently rejected.
Would somebody else like to talk?
About Maundy Thursday or
No.
open choice? I think, we've been receiving a lot of emails today, all of us. And some were very supportive and some were very angry and not understanding, I think, the whole purpose of open choice and what it's going to mean to this town. There are roughly 47 school districts in the state that do open choice, and I think we should be one of them. I think it speaks to the values of the Portrait of a Graduate. I think it speaks to the values of this town and who we are as people. We've always had a big heart. We've always taken care of each other. And now we have the opportunity to do something for 3 kindergartners and 2 first graders. Little people that are going to come to this town and probably benefit. And not only are they going to benefit, but we're going to benefit, because we will be doing something that elevates everybody. It's going to elevate them, and it's going to elevate us as a community. And I think it's time we start doing that. I think we start as a community to become more open to what open choice will give us. I think it's an opportunity, and I look at it as an opportunity, an educational opportunity, a cultural opportunity, a social opportunity for all of us. And I think we will benefit, and we will be the better for it.
I think one of the reasons we received so many letters against it was the extremely misinformation around how much it cost, and nobody's in a position to up the school budget by $1 million. I think there was a lot of misinformation that drove people through fear to write into the board. So the number of letters in support and against, do we weigh them all equally when there's so much misinformation flying around? Over the last 3 meetings, we've listened to Dr. Smith and Dr. DeMay come in and talk about the Open Choice program. We've heard cost breakdowns, logistics, and details of the lottery participation. We've had our questions answered. I've reached out to people in other districts to hear their experiences. I've undertaken due diligence, educating and understanding the program and its history. I've followed up with Dr. DeMay to ask further clarifying questions. And I discovered that there are almost 50 eligible receiving districts that neighbour New Haven, Hartford and Bridgeport. In my research, I could only find 1 eligible district who is not currently participating in the programme, and 1, Woodbridge, who have opted not to fill seats this year. Open Choice has been up and running since the 1990s. Many towns have found Open Choice to be a rewarding, manageable experience, choosing to renew their participation year after year. This isn't a 13-year commitment that we're making. Among those participating districts are Westport and Weston, and they've both been in an open choice relationship with Bridgeport for more than 20 years. It's regrettable that so much misinformation has been spread on the cost issue. And I thank First Select Woman Lynn van der Sluis for her support of the programme and her clear explanation of the numbers in today's Good Morning Wilton. I hope that today Dr. Smith's clear explanation of the costs will be accepted at face value by those members of our community who have previously expressed doubt. Open Choice is a success today in 50 districts across Connecticut because it confers benefits on both sending and receiving district. If it cost a fortune, as some have asserted, it would not still be a viable concern 20 years after its inception. If Weston, a town very much like our own, can run this programme successfully, so can we. If we have capacity, and we've heard tonight that we do, we should move forward with courage and a firm belief that this is the right thing to do for our students, and the students from Norwalk who would be welcome at Miller Driscoll School. The programme aligns with the values of our town, our schools, and what we're trying to teach our students about being active, socially sensitive citizens. In the words of Lynn van der Sluis, Open Choice is a fiscally prudent means to continue this proud and generous legacy. We've been given an opportunity to act for the greater good, to demonstrate social responsibility, positive relationship building, respect and kindness. All lofty goals that we have identified in our portrait of a graduate. On our website, we proudly proclaim Wilton Public Schools for a better world. It's time to lift those words off the page and live them.
I'd like to go last if possible.
Okay, I'll go next. When I sat down a month or so ago to write out why I supported Wilton's participation at Open Choice, my first thought was because it's the right thing to do. And I didn't get any further than that. And as we've discussed it at the board, you all discussed it without me the first time, and then the second time I was here, and Kevin has answered the questions about the finances. CES has answered the questions. Andrea, thank you for your addition to that. And I still, when I sat down, I thought it's the right thing to do, but I can't stop there. Obviously, I attended the Wilton Public Schools in the 70s and the 80s during the years of Project Concern, and the only explanation I ever received about it was at home from my parents. And all they told me was Wilton had better schools and Bridgeport didn't have the money to have good schools, so some children from Bridgeport were being educated in Wilton. And my parents told me it was the right thing to do. And just so everyone knows, my parents had a mixed marriage. One was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And I can say clearly I have no memory of a Project Concern student misbehaving. And I have to do a shout out. Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much, Jill, for getting in touch with Albert Ruff. Albert and I were often in the same homeroom, as he was a UFF and I was an SCHW. And to him and Pam and Diana, it was just a great thing to have them in the class of 1983 at Wilton High. My husband, who graduated in 1982, had 5 Project Concern students in his class. And it's been my honor to serve 2 terms on the Board of Education and also to have been voted in by the board, as per our town charter, to sit in an empty seat until the next election. I serve because I believe in public education, its worth and its absolute necessity for the health of American democracy. I am fortunate that I grew up in a state with a long history of public education. Has the history of public education in the Northeast been perfect? Absolutely not. But we haven't given up. We strive for the time when every child in Connecticut, as well as in the United States, has access to the quality of public education we provide in Wilton. Growing up in the United States, I am very familiar with the tales of rags to riches and pulling oneself up by the bootstraps. In fact, some of the stories I heard were about people in my own family. And like the well-known Horatio Alger novels that became part of the American narrative, my ancestors' success came not just from hard work, but also a piece of luck, an opportunity to succeed. It's the American way. Provide an opportunity to succeed. It's up to the individual, then, to do the hard work. Kevin Smith and CES have answered the concerns about money. Private citizens are donating in case something unforeseen occurs. And all that is needed is for Wilton to open their doors.
I support Wilton joining the ranks of Westport and Weston and participating in Project Open Choice. After several discussions at this table, researching the program, including the experience of other districts, and for all the reasons Kevin spoke to earlier, I support Dr. Smith's recommendation to open 5 seats in 2023, with 3 in kindergarten and 2 in first grade. The program would not be successful if the costs were as high as some speculate. The program has been running successfully, both fiscally and academically, for more than 20 years and in almost 50 districts across Connecticut. The costs are 0 to minimal. The experience of Weston and Westport bear this out. This is not regionalization. There is no mandate. There is no loss of control. I spent all day in Hartford and waited my turn at almost 11 p.m. to testify against regionalization. This is not it. Participation in open choice is exactly that, a choice. A choice Wilton gets to make on a yearly basis, depending on enrollment and experience. It is a choice to give Wilton students the opportunity to build relationships and understand the experiences of a more diverse peer group and help authentically prepare them for the world beyond Wilton. It is a choice to give Norwalk families who are looking to give their children a better education the opportunity for a life-changing Wilton education. It is a choice to live the portrait of the graduate. It is a choice I am ready to vote for.
That's why I chose to go last. I already knew how you guys all felt. I'm sure you guys have had conversations. I was never called, nobody's ever asked me my opinion of this. I've only asked questions like everybody else, but never would we have had a meeting that would have a vote without one of our members had you guys already not known how this would play out. It's just like something that's, we're like on a wheel, it happens every time. This is like, just never ends. Kevin, I didn't expect you to comment about what's been going on in town. It's not your goal. Ruth, I appreciate the gesture at the beginning of this meeting, but I really would have expected as chair of a board, the Board of Education, and also a member of the DTC, that you would have said maybe something specifically to me or spoken to me separately.
I would have
Diversity-
suspected that the apology letter that went out today that said I had nothing to do with that statement and would have been honored.
Point of
Sorry.
order, let's stick to discussing open choice.
We can, but I'm going to finish. Diversity, ironically, the very issue that has divided part of our town is an issue about diversity. Diversity is more than skin color and backgrounds and how much money you make. It's also about being accepting of differing thoughts and opinions. One of the pillars of the portrait of the graduate is active, socially sensitive citizen. I have heard all the ways that our district is trying to implement this into the classroom. Maybe the true work needs to start at home first. Most importantly, and I can't see anything, sorry. Most importantly, all the Wilton students that we are here to watch out for are watching all of this. Whether anyone here wants to acknowledge this, students in the high school who wish to agree with a Republican value or position or raise certain questions or concerns often feel coerced into silence and compliance. We have always believed them, but following yesterday's comments, I have zero doubt, nor should any of you. I will skip my part about the DTC overstepping again. I have brought this up. I'm always ignored. I bring up things about our election process. It was on the table. We couldn't get to it. It came to another meeting. It's never come again. Mandy writes emails. They're ignored. I mean, at some point, we're all here. We all got elected to this position, and it would be nice to feel like we were truly a part of it sometimes. An issue that divides our town this much to the point where people are called racist and classist, having resentment towards minorities and fear-mongering for having differing opinions is not a good way to embark on a new program, especially one about diversity. Sorry, I didn't eloquently prepare something like all of you. I just wrote down a bunch of comments, so now they're kind of all over the place.
You're doing fine.
You're doing fine, keep going.
Let's at least be honest about how this all works, right? We're inviting students from another town. Great. I don't think anybody that has opposed this program has not wanted to do that. I don't think anybody has not been welcoming to diversity. I think what the issue has been is about the finances and making sure that this is not going to spiral out of control. And Lynn and Chris, if your families are taking care of that, then I'm sure most people in our town would probably feel better about the whole situation. You know, we talk about the misinformation. Part of the issue with our board is that communication to our town and our community about very specific issues is not so great. People find out about it after the fact, people find out about it at the very last minute, and then they feel like they don't know what's truly going on. And then people are all over the place with their facts, and then people get angry. And then comments like yesterday about calling us names because we don't agree with something or because we have questions about it comes about. We talked about communication on this board, and it would be great to truly fix it, which I see on the agenda tonight. There's something about it, which is great. Talking about these kids, for a moment, I would like for people to truly think about these kids who we are asking to come here. Some of them will be put on a bus for up to 45 minutes. They will be brought to our schools. They will have school here, and they will go home on a bus for 45 minutes. There is no plan in place to support them afterwards, at least not one that I've heard of. We talked about having concerns about it. There's no plan in place, unless I have missed something. We talked to other schools about it. They had a plan in place. It fell apart. It's one of the biggest complaints for districts that participate in this, and I don't want to have somebody come here and feel like they truly don't fit. It's hard when you don't come to any social event, when you don't come to sporting events, when you don't participate in after-school activities, because suddenly you are a person that people keep calling Wilton the bubble, that you were invited into this bubble, and now I feel like you're like a pet, that we are all kind of looking at because you're different than us. I would like, if we're truly going to do this, to put something in place. I'd love to say before we vote on it, but I know that that's not going to be the case. How we pick these kids. There are differing numbers tonight than what I have, but the majority of our students, most of Norwalk is white. So we're essentially cherry picking students to be a part of this because Wilton is not going to see diversity in somebody who is a white child who just doesn't have the same economics, social economics that we do. Which means now we are actually selecting a black person or a Hispanic person or whatnot. That, in and of itself, is racist. I don't understand. I don't understand why nobody else agrees with that, and that's fine. I don't need to talk about the grand list. There's people in town that are saying that, actually I will talk. Norwalk's grand list is 15.2 billion, and ours is 4.4 billion. So they're talking about us helping. We're not the more affluent town, despite what people think. That's what I'm being told. We talked about the sped parts. We talked about those. Again, I truly am not. I want you guys to understand. Those people who have questions about this program, it has nothing to do with not wanting to open our hearts to other disadvantaged kids. You just had a budget ask that was cut by $1.4 million. And now we're talking about cutting strings and cutting all these things, and people are concerned about that. So again, Lynn and Chris, thank you if you guys are taking on whatever costs are not covered. I guess my question for you guys is what are we doing? What are we doing about the children when they come here and helping them truly integrate?
Yeah, do you mind if I were just to respond? Because I think you raised a couple of good points, and I think to your point about the economics. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. There's not without risk because we don't know who the kids are, right? But I do really believe in my bones, and again, the experience that we've gleaned from other places all point in the same direction. That from a cost perspective, it really is marginal at best. And so I think, I'd like people to, to accept that because I think that's accurate. There's no record of a district incurring, whatever, $22,000, $23,000, $24,000 in cost when an open choice kid walks in the district that I'm aware of. So I think the other piece that's just important, and, the way that you were framing it is a little worrisome to me. The state has established a goal about reducing economic, racial, ethnic isolation. It's a broad goal. It's written into the law. The comments that Kim Healy made earlier, she's right. Like, this program isn't fixing the issues with the cities. And Kim, I'll say thank you to you for your work on the committee with reading legislation. But this program, I don't think the stated purpose was to fix the cities. The purpose was to take a step to reduce those barriers. And so, for my part, we're proposing to create an opportunity for a few kids. So it's a small effort, but I think it's an important effort, both materially and symbolically. And so for the families that are participating, they're making the choice, not us, right? The choice that we've made is to create some seats, but that's kind of where it ends for us in one respect. So the lottery, the weighted lottery, absolutely is intended to address those goals. And so there is a profile of a student that this is intended to benefit, and that's a profile that's different from most of the kids, certainly not all here, but most of the kids, many of the kids in our town. And I think, again, I'll go back to, kind of my own personal belief that having greater diversity is good for everybody. I think with respect to your, the concrete question you just asked about what is the plan to support them, I don't think we can have a plan. I think we can have some real strong intent, but until we know who the families are, who the kids are, what the kids' interests are, I think that's all going to develop. I'll go back to, and I agree with some of the comments that, have been written in or were made here tonight. This is a really generous community, and people will step forward. We have some substantial private financial commitment to make things happen that may not have been in place in previous generations. And so I feel pretty confident that as the needs arise or opportunities arise, if the participating families are willing, we could probably make things happen for kids. But until we know who they are and what their circumstances are, I don't know what the answer is. So that's the best I can offer you tonight and offer anybody.
I guess I would like a promise from you that you will do everything you possibly can to make these kids truly feel like they belong.
I promise.
Even if you're going to pick them up yourself and bring them in.
Well, you and I might have to go together, but if you're good, I'm good.
Fine.
And Kevin and I had a conversation, that exact conversation, Jen. I don't know if that makes you feel better. As someone who grew up with a Project Concerned kids, and let me tell you, they came from Bridgeport, and talk about a long bus ride, and they provided their own bus, and so it looked different than Wilton kids. And let me tell you, Wilton back then was white. There were maybe 2 black families, right? So we knew they were different. And looking back as an adult, I'm like, what did we do? We didn't do much. But I have to tell you, Albert was very involved. He was in the student government. There were kids on Project Concern who participated in every athletic game, and transportation was provided, and there was individual families in town. And Michael Gurdon has sat at this table and described his brother's experience during Project Concern. And so there's a lot that goes on that we don't see. But I had this conversation with Kevin too, because I look back and think of 8-year-old Laura and thinking, I didn't know, what happened when we all went to a birthday party? Was someone even invited? I don't know. But that's something,
I agree.
Ancient Laura now understands, and so that's the first question I raised with Kevin when he talked to me about open choice.
And we're smarter about those things now.
We are.
The whole inclusion thing, and having if you're going to have a birthday party, that inclusion piece needs to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And the support systems, I think we're smarter about as well.
And CES can help.
I mean, Chip has said if we go to them with a plan.
But Steve was here earlier too and offered the support of We Act, which again we'll have to we'll have to see what emerges. But I think what I'm hearing is there is community support to honor that commitment that these kids can participate as fully as possible.
Because I'm a part of WEAC, and we drive cystic fibrosis kids that come to this country to get treated. We drive them back and forth to Stanford Hospital all the time. So I mean, there are people out there that would be willing to help to make this work.
And so for people who don't know what WEAC is, please define it.
So it's all the interfaith institutions in the town of Wilton, and we're all part of this, and we've done a lot of projects, the Mill project, the CF project. There's just the Syrian family that came here right after the beginning of that war. All 5 kids just became American citizens.
So great.
That's huge. considering that she walked maybe 10 miles with those kids on her back and alongside her to get out of Syria and went to Jordan, and then somehow got here, and now all those 5 kids are citizens of the America. So, I mean, there are ways to do this. They really are. And there are communities and people that are willing to help and make it work.
I'm glad people are stepping up. I think, again, this is part of, we're kind of jumping into this, and there hasn't been a huge community discussion about this until the night of us voting.
I know.
I think that part of the diversity thing that is a little bit different now than was back then is that people are much more in tune to diversity.
Yes, I agree.
And we, even in our own school districts, we point it out. We point it out in a way to celebrate it, but you're pointing it out.
Yes.
So, again, making sure that these kids truly feel comfortable and they're not just here because they're here. People keep comparing this to the ABC program. It's not even close.
No.
It's, people talk about, oh, these kids are choosing to come here. These kids, they're highly academic. They want to be here. They're leaving their families. It's not the same thing. It's a totally different situation. And the ABC house, those kids are successful, and that program is successful, A, because they have an amazing amount of drive and they want to be here, but B, because there's a lot of community support in place for them.
Yep.
There are financial supports in place for them. There are people at the high school that tutor them regularly or come talk to them regularly. There are people all over this community that drive them everywhere. That's why they're successful. And I just would like to know, and I would have loved to have had something more permanently in place ahead of time, but I will take all of you and I will take WEAC to go with it.
No, WEAC is great. Truly.
Great. I wish they had said something before an hour ago. Well, 2.5 hours ago.
These are very young children, so the whole need and the whole support system will be different than for ABC.
Agreed.
But most definitely, I think there will be a commitment from the community to help them and fill the need.
If you're putting your little kid on a bus, the parents they value education, they want the best for their kids.
They do. But my only other comment about diversity in this town is, people keep telling us that, their kids is a small group of people that have signed a petition that have said that we have not made them, feel comfortable outside of their Wilton bubble, and that they weren't exposed to diversity enough and whatnot. We all made a choice to move here. We also have a choice to leave. And you also have a choice to take your kid to any other program and expose them to diversity. So on some level, this isn't a school responsibility. I appreciate what our schools are trying to do, and I appreciate the fortunate to graduate and that we're trying to, make this huge, well-rounded person, and that's great. But I wish people in this town also would recognize the fact that there's so much a parent can do to help their child not feel like they are part of an affluent, primarily white town. And while we're talking about that, let's not forget about the 25% of our school population who's not white. Mm-hmm. That's kind of not fair to all of them who are here and who have organically made our town more diverse. But there's all of these conversations in town that I would love for them be real. That's all I'm going to say about it. I think those are maybe all of my questions for now. Or comments, I should say.
If I can just counter something you said about 70% of students being white in Norwalk. I think it's 25% of students in Norwalk are white. 53% are Hispanic, 15% are black, and 4% are Asian.
I have different numbers, you have different numbers, and somebody else had different numbers, so I think they're all over the place.
So, if the board's prepared to vote, I would ask for a motion.
No, wait, sorry. I have one more comment. I'm not in favor of accepting first grade students. I'm not really in favor of the whole program because I'm not here as me personally. I'm supposed to be here representing a huge part of our town. But I already know it's going to pass because there are enough of you and I know how you feel, but I do not support accepting first grade students.
Why is that?
Why?
Because we should be starting in kindergarten so that they get our education from day one. So we're not backtracking in first grade, and to give them the best opportunity to experience a full Wilton education. And
So you want 5 kindergartners as opposed to?
I don't think we can do 5 kindergartens, but if we could, I'd rather do that than take 2 first graders.
So if we were taking 3 kindergartners and stopping there, would that make a difference?
I think it just goes to, and not even the financial cost, not the anything cost of any of this. It's truly just, if we're going to take a student, you should take them in kindergarten. You should take them from the get-go and start from the beginning.
Yeah, I think optimally, I probably wouldn't argue with you. And, as I presented back in February or whenever we first spoke about this, I didn't have a strong rationale for the number 5. It was
I remember.
looking at class size, trying to figure out critical mass, what's too few, what's too many. And then, the distribution was really about class size average preservation. But I think, theoretically, your point, right? We should take in kindergarten. Again, this is year 1. And, if we have this conversation again next year, maybe that becomes again, depending on how you vote now, but if that, that's something we probably should look at.
And where are we placing these kids? Are they all going in the same classroom, or are you splitting them all up?
I would spread them.
There's no assumption that they would know each other, right, before they come
Yeah,
here?
not necessarily.
I mean, they might or they might not.
They will by the time they've been on the bus a few times.
One would hope.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe a conversation for later. I promise I have nothing else to say.
Anybody else around the table have anything to add or say? Yeah, I'm just looking for the motion there.
There you go. There you go.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve participation in the open choice program?
I'd like to make a motion that Wilton participates in the Open Choice Program for the next school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Let the record show 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Is there a motion to open 5 seats between kindergarten 3 seats and first grade 2 seats for the 2023-24 school year?
Wait, what?
Is there a motion?
Sorry.
Oh, wait. Is there a
Where are we
motion
going
to
with-
open 5 seats between kindergarten and first grade, with 3 and 2 seats respectively, for the 23-24 school year?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Pam. All in favor? Right. All opposed? Let the record show 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is discuss and approve Wilton Public Schools Communication Task Force.
So, Jen, to your point about communication, so there's a couple of pieces here. I think, I won't respond to some of your perception, but there is a routine pattern here of the way the board communicates. I think in general, as a district, we can get better. We have a range of ways that we communicate to people, and we consistently get feedback that it's good, it's bad, it's too much, it's not enough, it's the right kind, it's the wrong kind, and on and on and on. And so it's something we've been talking around for years, and as we have tried different platforms and things like that, we've tried to get better. So we're proposing a different approach to this. And so what I'm asking the board to consider is really forming a communications task force. So a couple of you would participate. Fran and I would chair that with some others. And let's ask some questions and try to get into this. And so what I'm interested in trying to do with this is really circle back to and improve our communication strategy across the district with, the full range of stakeholders. In addition to that, as you know, I'm also interested in kind of zeroing in and revisiting how we communicate between staff and parents, or teachers and parents, specifically around achievement. And so, I've observed, a couple of patterns over the years. We have, conferences once a year in the fall, and, as meaningful as those can be, they, last anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes, and not every parent, can or gets to participate. And then, I think secondly, as I've observed, as we've made the transition to digital devices and digital platforms, there's just less paperwork coming home in the backpack. And so, particularly parents of our younger kids are just not seeing the good work that kids are doing in classrooms. And so I think it raises the question for me, how can we better communicate with families around students' progress, and what are the opportunities that exist that we may not be taking advantage of yet, but we can. So, through this task force, those are the kinds of questions that I'd like to participate. Kind of beyond that, with the current communication platforms we use, we have some redundancy. So I'm going to ask this task force to kind of look and facilitate some of our transitions. So as you know, a year ago we moved to a new website platform. That website company was purchased earlier this year. We also launched an app, with the intention of trying to drive, one-way communication, at least, in a more meaningful way, since more and more folks use handheld mobile devices. The company that now owns our platform has a much better tool than we have, so we have the opportunity for good two-way communication on a mobile device, and we can eliminate some of the redundant communication platforms that we currently have, like School Messenger, like Remind. There's probably another one. So anyway, I'd like you to consider just creating a task force. And so, the board over the years, Laura, you can probably speak to this. There have probably been, task force or working groups episodically here and again. So, the difference is it's mission focused, it's time bound, there are clear deliverables, and, try to, we'll have to set a schedule and some, completion dates, but I'd like to try to use that vehicle to really move us forward. So that's the proposal.
So the action, does anybody have any questions for Kevin regarding it?
Well, I would just suggest that it not be too big.
Yeah.
Because I find that the more people you have involved, sometimes meetings can either go too long or get sidetracked.
Sure. Yep. Fran, do you have about, size?
Basically, we, in terms of the size, representatives from each of the schools, our webmasters, administrators, so we're talking about like maybe 12 to 15.
Yeah, and if that's, we can pare that down if we need to.
Grandparents?
Yeah. And parents, of course. Yeah. And students.
Right. Okay.
Is there a motion to establish a communications task force? Thank you, Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nicola. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0.
Great, so we'll get rolling, and Fran will be the primary facilitator, and so we'll just, we'll send out some organizational information, and we'll get going ASAP.
And I think if, in the coming days, if anyone on the board has a particular interest in participating, just let me know.
Can I let you know now?
You can let me know now.
I have an interest in participating.
I was expecting that email coming, when the meeting ended. If anyone else has an interest, let me know. Next week is we have second reads under discuss and approve of some policies from our previous meeting. The first one is policy 6148, completion rates of the free application of federal FAFSA, federal student aid for the FAFSA. We did a first reading on this over at our last meeting. It is to conform with new requirements under Connecticut general statutes. Are there any further questions on this? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve policy 6148, completion rates for the free application for federal student aid?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Nicola. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Next is to discuss and approve policy 3542.31, free lunches. This also was on the agenda last week, and it is now to conform with other state requirements.
Yeah, it is. So some of the, we revised some of the language that, came out in that no shaming law.
Are there any questions about this policy? Is there a motion to approve policy 354231, free lunches?
I so moved.
Thank you, Pam. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. All in favor? Any opposed? 5-0. And then finally is discuss and approve policy 4141, salary guides. This was also discussed at the last meeting, and it's just revised to conform with current practice, correct?
Part of the policy review, there was some redundant language that we struck.
Yes. Or is there any questions on the salary guides policy? Is there a motion to approve policy 4141, salary guides?
So moved.
Thank you, Nicola. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Also 5-0. Future business and information items. Our next regular meeting will be after the break on April 20th. Wish everyone a happy and healthy and restorative break. For those who are celebrating holidays, we wish you a happy holidays. Then Board of Education meeting following that will be on May 4th. It's not included in this agenda, but I would like to remind everyone that the annual town meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 2nd. The Board of Education next regular meeting after that is May 18th, and then June 1st, and then June 15th. Last but not least, there is another opportunity for comments from the public. If there's any comments from the public.
Hi again, Kim Healy, 14 Hidden Lake Bridge. I would just like to remind you that there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of children throughout our state that will still require us to be concerned about them. So if you need any recommendations of volunteer opportunities for your children or yourselves, please reach out. I'm always happy to help connect people with them. There was a lot of use of the word values tonight. And so one of the things that I thought about was, do we value civility? I know I, as a selectman, signed a proclamation saying that I would act with civility, and I do really believe that words matter, and that taking ownership of words, whether or not you feel like you created them or put them out, still are important. So I did notice that people who wrote in opposition tonight were called angry. I'm not sure if that was appropriate term of, appropriate way to refer to them if they just were opposed for whatever the reasons they provided. But I think it was mentioned that the DTC had put out an email yesterday. I have informed you all of that. They called Republicans racist, ultimately. And, I take great offense to that. And I wrote you all about it, and I told you that I took offense to it, and I have not heard from you. I mean, that's real. I know you don't sign a proclamation saying that you will act with civility, but to know that I am one of your constituents, ultimately, and took offense to something that was put out, I expect it to be acknowledged. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. Bill Lawler, 40 Mulbrook Drive. I have a few comments about, I was late arriving, so I just have a few basic comments about process that sort of echo, I think, some of the things that Kim had said. You know, just to recap, there was, and I think this is directly germane to the decision-making process, and so the decision was reached tonight regarding open choice. Yesterday, there was an email that Kim referenced that said not just Republicans, but anybody who opposed open choice must be doing so based on racial animus. It was appalling. And it wasn't just Republicans. There's independents, there's Democrats I know who weighed in against this. This morning, we got an apology, which I appreciate, from the chair of the DTC, saying, we didn't mean that. We shouldn't have said it. Obviously, that was well received. I like to think it's sincere. I guess that remains to be seen. I came here tonight wearing a few hats. I'm a parent. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a husband of a member of the board. I'm a person who opposed open choice and one of the people that was maligned by that statement. And even having arrived late, I don't know exactly what was said on the record, but I never heard from Ruth. I never heard from Nicola, both members of the DTC. One would think the decent thing to do, if Ruth and Nicola, you distance yourself and you disavow those statements, would be to personally take responsibility for being on the DTC, having made those statements, and walk them back. I think a lot of people out here would like to hear you say, Ruth, especially as chair of this Board of Education, that you don't agree with those statements and you don't subscribe to such malignments of people who disagree with you politically. I emailed a few people yesterday to say, it's really cheap. I heard people say, well, if you disagree, you must be angry. If you disagree, you must misunderstand. Those are very well-worn, shop-worn tactics over the course of history that have been used to silence people. You heard from hundreds of people, I think, by way of email, opposing and in support. I'm here not just for me. I've been involved in politics for 25 years. I've seen things. It's okay. I have a pretty thick skin. But there are reams, dozens, hundreds of people out there in Wilton who will not speak up because they're afraid to do so. They are afraid to speak up because they know that if they step in, not just speaking up on issues, but if they step in, they get involved, they volunteer, they put their name into the fray, they're going to be maligned. That is wrong, and what you guys have done, and your silence and complicity in this, and not speaking up, you've had 3 hours. You've done nothing, and you've made the situation worse. We deserve better. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Lynn Vanderslice, 103 Middlebrook Farm Road again. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, one about my personal commitment, and I was aware of Chris's commitment. There are other people besides the two of us. I've already been speaking to people. I have a network of people that I've developed over a long number of years, primarily because of the work I did with ABC and an extended community that I'm involved with, who really primarily, their primary philanthropy is children from economic disadvantaged areas, not necessarily of color, but just providing better opportunity for students who are economically disadvantaged. So yes, I'm gonna have a lot of free time come lunch. And what I did for a lot of years before I decided to put my financial brain back, going, is I spent years working in that area, volunteering in that area of expanding opportunities for children from economic disadvantaged areas. And I plan to stay in Wilton, and I plan to do that on behalf of this. I also want to say, Jen, your concerns were the same concerns that were expressed before we opened the ABC house. We were approved for 8 students, but we only had a small house, so we couldn't bring all 8 in. So we brought in 3. We brought in 3 because the worry that what if one leaves, two were coming in as freshmen, one was coming in as sophomore. You know, if it didn't work, you didn't want somebody isolated. And it turned out one of the students didn't come back from their November break. But it was absolutely isolating in the first several years. And there wasn't the network of volunteers that you have now. There was a small group of us who really were focused on this and helped out. I mean, I just met with the Miller Driscoll PTA last week. You know, you've got some very engaged women that were there and an engaged man, and I would hope that that group would welcome these students. And you know, the other thing I'll say is my son was not educated in the Wilton Public Schools. We purposely put him in schools that had economic diversity. That was important to us. And, you know, I saw it myself, how parents embrace the children that don't have the same economic advantages that they did. They were expensive schools, there were scholarships that allowed those kids to be there. So I've lived it myself, I've gone through what your concerns are, and I'm confident that the people, not only the people who are donating, but there are other people in this community, just as they circled around Ray and Lewis during their first year, and then when all 8 of them were there. I mean, it took a number of years for ABC to be what it is now, where it isn't isolated, and to find host families in the beginning. What is this program? So anyway, I'm rambling, but and the other thing I want to say is I fact check when I get letters, because often, as you both have said, you have different statistics for different things about different towns. There are resources out there. There is something from Advanced CT profile for every town. I can tell you our grand list per capita is 150% of Norwalk's. Their share, commercial share of the grand list, according to the way they calculated, is 150% of ours. You can look at the home prices, ours are more than 50% higher. So, but there are, I'm happy to share all those resources where when you get things that are data driven and you want to check them, I can give you the resources where you can do it. Anyway, I'll stop. Thanks.
Any other comments from the public?
One more. Ken Hoffman, 182 Trim Hill Road. I'll keep this long. No, I'm just kidding. I want to volunteer. But I want to volunteer for this in a different way because I'm not busy enough with planning and zoning and the investment committee. One of the things we didn't talk about tonight, which I think is clearly important, is if we're going to have these students come in open choice, is making sure that their parents feel like they're participating in the program. And that means 2 things. That means inviting their parents to participate with us, and it means going to their community and participating with their parents. And I would like to volunteer to do that. And I would like to organize anybody else who wants to volunteer to do that, because I think that's equally as important as welcoming the children. I think that it addresses a little bit of what you were speaking with in terms of making sure that there's an inclusive program. It's not perfect. I mean, you could end up in public service like a lot of my kids, and you know that doesn't make a lot of money. But I think it would be a good thing for us to do. So anything you can do to reach out to me, I'd be happy to do that. Coordinate it with Lynn and Chris, and figure out ways that we can get the parents involved too. Thank you.
Elizabeth, 6 Glen Hill Road. Let me just express my thanks to you. I think you've made a very wise decision. But I think it's also now incumbent upon the community, much as Lynn has expressed and the last speaker has expressed, to come forward and be part of those volunteers that you're asking for, to do all kinds of different things. As I mentioned, the Wilton Interfaith Action Committee, 36-member steering committee, has gotten behind this. They want to be part of helping in that in ways they have a lot of experience in doing. And please know that that help is there. It's very hands-on help, people volunteering to do it. So I want you to know that resource is there, and I also want to thank you again for taking the time to think through this open choice, to think it through very wisely, and to make a decision that I think we will all come to appreciate, even as we appreciate it now, many of us, I'll come to appreciate even more in the future. Thank you.
Is there anyone online, Lucille? Anyone else in the room? Meeting is adjourned at 10 o'clock.